Engine on deck.
What are you doing there? They caught you.
I was trying to grab something off the table. Is everything going?
Oh, what's going on, man?
You know, we got another police-involved shooting. Unfortunately, you know, these things happened in police work, and another, you know, lackluster response from our mayor, who doesn't seem to be supportive, even in the face of, you know, everything that seems justified. We'll get into it and everything, but it's just one more thing added to everything else, and then we'll talk about it, and we'll go back and look at prior instances and how his response has been since he got into office, and also just talk about his overall attitude towards the police that you know we've spoken about before. We've talked about these other shootings in the past. We can't show body worn camera because of whatever reason that we're getting taken down for showing body worn camera, which is actually allowed. But so we can't do that anymore right now. But we can talk about it. What were you thinking when you heard about this?
Yeah, I mean, from a police perspective, right? You say, oh, justified shooting, everything looks good. You know, somebody comes at you where you're taught. Somebody comes at you with a knife. You know, you can elevate your, you know, to use a firearm. That's what you're supposed to do, right? You're not supposed to pull out a taser. You're not supposed to,
Oh,
you know, the
yeah.
bullshit 20-foot rule and all that other crap. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to protect yourself and you protect your partner and you protect other people if there are other people in a room or in the street or whatever. But that's what you're supposed to do. So when it came down to, you know, push down to shove, you had to discharge your firearm. I'm a big advocate. You know, I don't think anybody like I've never met anybody in the police department that said, "Oh, I'm gonna want to shoot somebody today," or you know, "I'm gonna use my firearm." You know, nobody wants to do that. And for the most part, as we know, right, everybody goes through, you know, their career without even discharging their firearm.
Right.
So I don't know if you ever saw the Seinfeld episode. It's hilarious when they're in L.A. and they're looking for Kramer, you know, and he's accused of the smog strangler, like he's accused of that. And they get in the back of a police car and they ask the two cops, "Oh, nice shotgun. Is that, you know, is that 12 gauge? Yeah, 12 gauge." And they're like, "Oh, did you ever shoot anybody?" And the both cops are like, "No." It's
Right.
just how life is, you know. So, but
Yeah, 100%. I don't know, and I've never known anybody that has come into work looking to get involved in a life or death situation. It happens. It happens all the time. Sometimes there are dire consequences, such as this one, where this emotionally disturbed, well, this person with an emotionally disturbed person, you know, emotional mental health background, that was documented in the NYPD. They said um, made choices that cost him his life, and the officers had to make choices to protect their lives, the lives of others. We're going to get into the exact scenario of what happened and why we feel that that is justified. And again, so people don't know, we don't discuss these topics really at length prior to the show to try and keep the conversation organic. So, you know, I don't know how you feel about things and whether they're justified or not. We kind of can figure it out because we know each other and we know the situations, but that's why, you know, and vice versa. But that's why sometimes, you know, we'll have opposing opinions, and that's fine because we come from different places and have different perspectives. But you know, common sense has to prevail a lot of times, and it just doesn't seem to be where the mayor, who leads the city, leads the police department de facto, uh, doesn't support his police, and he's shown it time and time again. And this is just one more example, and it's an unfortunate example. And like we said, actions have consequences, and you're 100% right, Rob. Oh, the cringe factor every time we see whether thankfully they get out of it unscathed or it escalates and just looks really ugly, where people are brandishing sharp edges and knives, advancing on the police, and they take out that stupid taser. Tasers are not meant for that type of armed confrontation. If one person takes out a taser, one person takes out a firearm, is designated as a shooter, whatever the case may be, and they attempt it really quick. But yeah, that 20 foot, 21-foot rule where, even if you fire on that person, they could still reach you within 21 feet with the knife and still be able to stab you. That's the training. And, unfortunately, deadly physical force must be met with the same in order to protect yourselves, protect your partners, and protect other human life. Because as we're going to see here, there was already somebody else that was injured. They walk into a scene that's just, a blood trail, and this is what they're confronted with.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up some good points. Like, you always hear the misconception of somebody, when we were talking about the taser, but you hear the misconception of people say, oh, why don't law enforcement shoot him in the arm? Why does law enforcement shoot him in the leg? You know what? It's called missing and the skip round and going down the block and hitting Mrs. O'Leary in the wheelchair who's crossing the street innocently in the head, because that's the only bullet that's where the bullet's going to find her, right in the head. It's going to skip off the ground and go down that. So that's a total misconception. We are taught to shoot center mass. We are taught to shoot to stop the person. We don't shoot to kill anybody. We shoot to stop everybody. Okay. And if you look at statistically, right, this is the statistics that we were taught in the range. Most MOS involved shootings, members of service involved shootings, happen within 3 to 7 feet. That's why, if you know as well as I do, when we're at the range, right, the 7-foot mark, the 15-foot mark, that's where most of your rounds are shot to count for. So when you talk about this 21-foot rule, that's bullshit. Nobody, that's a hard shot. If you, I don't know how you shot at the range, but from 25 yards or whatever, that's a hard shot. So I mean, 7 feet, 21 feet, those aren't easy shots either. So. But I mean, it's a close proximity, right? So when you think about, 21 feet as opposed to shooting at the range, 25 yards, I mean, you're in a close proximity with somebody. And let me ask you, when you go to a flat or you go to somebody's walk up, there's no 21 freaking feet anywhere. I mean, you're surrounded by walls and hallways and doors and all these different things. So it's definitely, it makes it much more harder for the police officers when you don't get the support that you would anticipate. Now, when you say, oh, we shoot EDPs, yeah, unfortunately we do, because I don't know many sane people that are running after cops with a butcher knife or trying to stab a police officer. Most people that are going to do that are in two categories, right? They either want to suicide by cop or they want to stop and hurt the police officer. And either one of those, to me, is not in a good mental state. So the fact that he has prior medical history, which Tish mentioned, I think, or I think it was the borough commander, that in itself should be right. That in itself is a conversation, because there is the problem. There lies the problem, not in the response to the police officers at the time of this critical incident. So.
Yeah. Like you said, most combat is in close quarters, and every incident that we talk about tonight is going to be the same way. The point of the 21-foot rule is that people, like you said, shoot to stop. Why didn't they shoot him in the leg? Why didn't they shoot the knife out of his hand? That miracle shot, that happens. That one time that the ESU guy was caught on camera and he shot the weapon out of the guy's hand. That was a miss. That wasn't an intentional shot. That was a miss. The point I bring it up is because people don't understand, and they think that, oh, it's so far. You have time to react. You have time to maneuver. First of all, the police do not have an obligation to retreat. If it is not safe to retreat for themselves They're partners of the public. There's no need for you to retreat unless you're retreating to a point of cover to protect yourself. If you need to take action, you need to stand your ground, you need to take action, unfortunately. And like you said, nobody comes to work wanting to get involved into these incidences. We're going to show the video of these 4 officers that went through that front door into that scene, were confronted, and had to make a life or death decision within seconds. And it's unfortunate the person had mental health issues. And maybe we'll talk about the Department of Community Safety and people saying, oh, why didn't, oh, this wouldn't happen if Mamdani sent in his social workers from the Department of Community Safety. They wouldn't respond to this job. This was a job of an assault, a man with a knife. Even if it comes up in the queue as a person with mental history, calls in the past, it doesn't matter. The police are the ones that are going to respond to this. And that's another thing that people just don't get. They keep talking about this Department of Community Safety, blah, blah, blah. Listen, if the system failed this individual prior to this incident, then it's on the system. Go back and look at the system and what treatment was offered and what treatment was taken and how this person was handled within the mental health system prior to this incident. But once you get to this instance, once you get to the point where he slashes his father with a butcher knife and then advances on the police and refuses to show his hands and drop the weapon, they have no choice at that point. They have no choice. And the point here also, besides bringing this out to the public and those who are not law enforcement watching the show, is that we need leadership to support the men and women. Listen, the leadership, this leadership is quick to call out when someone does something wrong. They have no problem with calling somebody out and doling out harsh discipline. We can talk about the different tiers of discipline or the upper echelon being disciplined the same as it would the rank and file. And obviously we've talked about that in the past. That's not the case. That's a different issue. But they have not had a problem with doling out discipline when they think that someone has done something wrong. But they need to be even quicker. And I've always said this, you need to even be quicker when you need to support the members and applaud a job well done. And you hate to say this is a job well done because someone did lose their life. But these officers followed their training. They did what they had to do. And now these officers need mental health intervention as well, because it's not normal and not a normal course of business, even though it's part of our business in law enforcement. But, another conversation again, does the job do enough post an incident like this to help the members of the service that were involved?
Yeah, so the mayor has plenty of time to, I would say, criticize police officers on other jobs. When we've seen other jobs that are questionable, you've seen other jobs that are not maybe as we would think were, clear cut. And he has plenty of time to say, we're going to investigate it. We're going to, do a thorough investigation. And he can also say in his own opinion, he can say, well, I don't like the way it looks right now, but this is, preliminary and subject to change. Like we love that statement. So the fact that he comes right out and he doesn't even acknowledge the work that the police officers did at this job. He downplays the injury, laceration, and he's probably appropriately right. I mean, when you classify a type of injury, right, that probably is a laceration, right? So that's a cut, so yeah, he's probably right. But I don't know, when you get cut with a butcher knife, I mean, yeah, that's a little, severe for me. I mean, I don't want to get cut, I can get a laceration with a razor knife and I had to get 3 stitches. So I can only imagine. And if you remember a while back, there was a detective that I think it was with an axe, right? He got hit across the head and he had in Midtown Manhattan, and he had to get stitches all across. So I don't think he's trying, is he playing towards his base, which that, I definitely feel that he is, and he doesn't want to look like he's pro-police. But at a certain point, the police work for you. Different agencies work for you, whether it's the sanitation, the fire department, all these different agencies work for you. You cannot be unsupportive of these every single time. So it was not conducive, in my opinion, for him to downplay it and say, oh, mental health had a role in it. Yeah, those are all factors. But like you just mentioned, what is the mental factor to police officers? What's their, how are they going forward? What do you feel about the shooting? Was it justified and everything else? But he just doesn't want to. He doesn't want to open himself up to his base where they're going to criticize him and say, well, you're not following the DSA and you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Right away, it's going to be in the newspaper, and the newspapers will pick up on it too. The Post, the New York Daily News, and probably the Times will say, oh, he's going against, his campaign promises. He's going against his base, and then he'll look bad again. So, but like I said, the myriad problems. But we never look at the root of the problem. We just say, oh, the police involved shooting and they shot an emotionally disturbed person.
Right. And John McCarry is saying here, as per the mayor, it was only a man with a laceration to the head. Again, downplaying the severity of the incident that led up to the police-involved shooting. No, this was a domestic incident, a fight between him and his father, and he hit his father in the head with a meat cleaver to a point where there was a blood trail up the entire staircase that these officers walked into. And I had a thumbnail. It's on X with blood on the stairs to try and get the point more across, but you can't use that in YouTube now because it's seen as promoting violence, and they would have pulled the show down. So I had to clean it up and just put the meat cleaver in his hand on dry stairs. But the reality is that staircase was full of blood. And this man, mental health issues or not, attacked his father and was advancing towards the police officers. And no doubt in their mind, no doubt in my mind, that he would have continued to advance and would have taken that weapon and used it against those officers had they not stopped the threat. And like you said before, that's what we're trained to do: stop the threat, shoot center mass, and stop the threat. So, Now, conversely, my question is, what do you think? How quick do you think? Because we're going to talk about also how quick the mayor gets on top of things. He puts out tweets when, inmates die of medical conditions in Rikers Island immediately, right? When other things happen, right? When someone dies of a medical issue in police custody, and he makes it sound like with his statements, he kind of almost implies, almost implies, that the police had something to do with it, when in fact, none of these cases have come back that there was any fault of the police or lack of treatment or anything like that given to anybody. But he jumps right out. He goes out and he watches soccer games at Rikers Island with the prisoners. I didn't see him stop at a precinct and turn out cops that aren't going to be able to watch the soccer game. I didn't see him stop at the precinct on any holidays or anything like that, right? Prior executives, prior mayors have done that. But he just has not shown support for the police and has downplayed it. And I think that if it was an instance where there is a question of justification, how quick do you think he'd jump out in front of that?
I just want to roll back to one point you mentioned. So everywhere you saw in the press conference and everything else, there was a mention of a butcher knife. Now, you mentioned a cleaver, and when I looked it up, I saw a cleaver, right? So the definition of a cleaver, okay, is a large, heavy, rectangular knife with a thick spine and wide blade, and it uses weight and momentum to hack through small bones, cartilage, and tough meat. Okay, so I think there is a downplay there. Okay, that it's a butcher knife. It is in the butcher knife family. but the hell, that's a cleaver. Okay. And that's a big difference between somebody coming out with what I would consider like a regular butcher knife where you're cutting meat up, or, you know, somebody that would use at home. I'm not saying that a regular butcher, but that thing is, if you go to Sam's Club or Costco and you ask them to cut you a fresh piece of meat, I mean, they're cutting through bone and every, yeah, they're fucking banging the shit out of that thing with that. So if somebody's getting whacked in the head with that,
we're 20 minutes in, we'll let that one go.
but we're getting whacked in the head, and somebody's advancing with that. I don't care what anybody says. You know, I see some people in the chat like John Pegas is talking about, oh, shoot him in the leg and all that, and we already addressed that. But the hell to shoot with that. I'm shooting to stop that guy as fast as I can. And you know what? I think there was 4 MOS that discharged their weapons. 3. I mean, I would have emptied everything I had in my gun, because there's no way am I going to let that thing get anywhere near close to me. So, you know, yeah, it all plays nice. Butcher knife, and in the press conference it was butcher knife. Bullshit. That's a meat cleaver, and that was going to do damage. So, I don't know. And the fact that you spoke about, the mental health illness and stuff. Yeah, like I said earlier, let's get to the root cause. I mean, the root cause is that this guy's out on the street or back home. Is he on meds? Was he taking his meds? Have there been follow-ups? Who's making sure that he's okay? That he doesn't go in there and grab a meat cleaver and start whacking his family, because it's crazy. And to me, coming downstairs and advancing on the police, I don't know. He's lucky. Somebody didn't dump all the rounds on him, because I don't know. It's just insanity to me. There's something wrong with him. But he deserved what he got. I'm sorry. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. And should the mayor have come out and knock onto a soccer game? Should he went to the thing? The mayor needs to evaluate all the facts and then come to a conclusion, and then he can go visit. I remember last time we went and visited the guy that was shot or whatever before he visited the cops. So I mean, come on.
Later, yeah. So John Pegu 66611. It's first time we're seeing you in the chat. Welcome to the show. Obviously a fan of the police, and so the NYPD has completely forgotten how to use his nightstick. They don't train you how to disarm someone with a weapon. No, they do. They train you to stop a threat of deadly physical force with the minimum amount of force necessary. In a situation where someone's coming down a staircase with a meat cleaver or a butcher knife, however you want to describe that knife that we brought up, and they're coming at you, and they're not listening to your commands, that is your first step in the use of force, is your verbal commands. You don't have time to take out your nightstick and try and whack away the knife. No, we're not trained to take out a nightstick and whack away someone's hand and whack their knife. Okay, that's not what you're trained to do. You're not trained to disarm someone with a weapon in that form. You're taught to stop a threat. And this is taught everywhere. It's not just the NYPD. You're taught to stop a threat. It's a threat of deadly physical force. And unfortunately, you have to use deadly physical force in order to stop that threat. Now, if he was standing somewhere and just standing still and waving the knife around or the meat cleaver around, you have different options. You have different options to use less than lethal. If they're not advancing on you or a civilian, there's no imminent threat of deadly physical force, then you don't have to bring up the deadly physical force, right? Then you can try to use less than lethal. You can try at that point maybe to use your taser from a more of a distance, or as emergency services may come in and use less than lethal rounds, right? You have those beanbag rounds that they can try and take them down with, right? Rob?
Yes.
So, but that's when you have time on your side. That's when you have the ability, okay, to go through that OODA loop and to keep reassessing the situation to maintain the fact that there is no imminent threat to your life or the life of others. Unfortunately, in this situation, there was no time when he refused to stop advancing and refused to drop the weapon and show his hands, they were confronted with deadly physical force and unfortunately had to use deadly physical force in return to stop that threat and cease that threat. And no, like you said in your earlier statement, I guess you missed Rob's point earlier, we don't shoot in the leg. We're not trained to shoot in the leg. We're not trained to shoot the weapon out of the hand. We're not trained to shoot somebody in the arm. We're not trained to shoot somebody in the head. We're trained to shoot center mass to stop the threat.
Also, like you say, in the force compendium, it doesn't have to go step by step, right? So if the guy comes at you with a knife, it doesn't mean you got to go, oh, I got to grab my nightstick, I got to grab my taser, and then I can grab my gun. No, you go right to the force that's either equal or greater to what the person has. Okay, so I think this is just somebody that may not be familiar with, law enforcement and you know what I would suggest that person goes. So I saw a video, and I don't think it was NYPD, but they brought in civilians and they let them go through like a tack house, and you have to see the reaction of them. Like they're running and all of a sudden they hear gunfire and they're literally like diving on the ground. They're like falling back and stuff. So they're not familiar with everything. So yeah, it's easier to be that to sit and in the chat and type this stuff in and say, what ifs. Well, there is no what ifs. The training is clear, and the officers follow the training. And like we've said on our podcast before, police work's not pretty, and it happens not to always be. So I think the officers, they had to do what they did. They didn't want to do what they did. They were forced. And who forced them? The person with the meat cleaver coming at you. That forces your reaction. I've been saying this like a couple times on the podcast that we've had in the previous weeks. I said, you want, and even with the fact that, you see people getting, judicial punishment or whatever hell we're calling it, right? If you comply and put your hands behind your back, nobody's beating the shit out of you. Okay. But if you're going to resist and you're going to fight, there's going to be force put upon you. You're going to be forced. There's going to be four at this stage of the game. There's going to be 4 or 5 officers jumping on you, each grabbing a limb. Your arms are going to get twisted. It's not going to be fun. But who dictates that? It's the perp. The perp dictates that. A compliant perp, okay, is a perp that doesn't get hurt, doesn't have any injuries, doesn't hurt any cops. But that's upon that perpetrator there. So, and like you've said in the past, and I totally agree with it, is that when you think you're unlawfully being arrested, you will have your day in court. You can then get the case dismissed. You can sue for false arrest. There's a lot of other things you can do, but to resist at that current time is the worst thing you could ever do. Just comply, and then you'll be treated, with the equal amount of force that you show the officers. So, and then with the nightstick thing, it reminds me of, remember TJ Hooker? I don't remember that. Remember that show where he threw the nightstick in the beginning of the show, and the nightstick like tripped up the guy. Oh, you ever try to throw your nightstick and trip up a guy? Your nightstick goes flying down the street, and you never get it back. But I think there's a lot here that needs to be said, and the justification for the shooting is clear. The support for the shooting is not clear, and I think there needs to be more information put out, particularly by the mayor, because if the mayor says it, then people tend to fall in line. And I think that's where the fault happens, is when the highest leadership in the city doesn't say a word and specifies that, it was a small, I think it's a laceration, but it was mental health and everything. That's irrelevant at this time. The guy had a freaking meat cleaver and he's coming at you. So what? So what?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of comments, a lot of interaction in the comments. I'm trying to keep up. A lot of new people in the comments, so we appreciate you guys here watching the show. And like Marlon was just saying, let me get it back up. Newsflash: Cops don't get Steven Seagal training in the academy. We aren't Jason Bourne and can't disarm a maniac with a cleaver. And again, I'll go back to, because there's other comments in here about, Mayor Mamdani and him sending in, social workers and everything else. This isn't a situation where social workers would have been sent in. This is a 911 call of a man with a knife and assault in progress, several 911 calls. This wouldn't be one of the situations where the Department of Community Safety would be sent in. But again, let's go back. If you want to go back and you want to talk about social workers and you want to talk about mental health treatment and the process and policies of the city, let's go back and let's talk to Mayor Mamdani and say, okay, what did they do with this individual? Look at your mental health end of it, not the police end of it. The police were called in at the end of the tragic end of this man's life, where it spiraled out of control to a point where he attacked his father, hatcheted his father, and then went after the police with that knife or with that meat cleaver. That's when the police got involved with him. The police were involved in his life in the past. He had mental health calls in the past, the EDPs, right? Somebody asked what's an EDP. That's an emotionally disturbed person. So a lot of times we use jargon and we skip past it. And those who aren't NYPD or police don't understand it. An EDP is an emotionally disturbed person, and he has had an emotionally disturbed person history. So the police have been involved in his life, but the involvement of the NYPD ends when we bring that person to the hospital for help. Then the mental health clinicians are supposed to take over. So, hey, why don't the mental health clinicians jump in? And why isn't he questioning them? What did you do to prevent him from reaching this boiling point? Instead of looking at the police as the villains for having to do something that they never wanted to do, that they now have to live with for the rest of their lives. Why aren't we looking at it that way?
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully they realize that they did a great job and they don't have any issues at all. I mean, obviously, a firearms discharge is tough, and shooting somebody is, also, has effects on you. But for the realization that they absolutely 100% did a great job is should be in their back of their mind all the time. And the fact that there is a continuing, and I could say over the past at least 20-25 years that I'm aware of, where the problem lies within the mental health procedures and policies. Can't tell you how many times that you brought an EDP to a hospital and you sat on them for a couple hours or whatever till they finally got admitted, and then they're held for maybe a day or two, and then the next thing you know, they're back out on the streets. You see them the next day. They're usually in the same, you're working in the same precinct, so you see them walking around the next day, and they might be all well and good, but what's their trigger points? What's going to cause them to go off again? So the follow-up isn't that good. We used to do that in what was I forget the name of it, the co-response team. I was fell under SOD, the Special Operations Division, for a while. And the co-response team, what they would do is they would look at the high propensity of a person going back into some sort of mental health issue. So they would do home visits and they would take clinicians with them. We had a myriad of clinicians. They would put them in the car, and the co-response team would go, not as a 911 call, but as a follow-up. So, and the reason we put the police officers with the co-response team was because this person, this EDP, or this person that had just been released and now is home, didn't know that we were coming. So you don't want to do like a surprise visit and have two civilians, knocking on your door and say, "Hey, Johnny, we're here to check on you. Is everything all right? How's your emotional feelings?" And all of a sudden this guy goes off on the wall like, "Who the fuck are you?" And start trying to kill him. So we have two police officers who take a back seat and let the clinicians do their work. I thought it was pretty good, but they never expanded. It stayed within a small thing. And then eventually it was taken out of the Special Operations Division, and it was put over into collaborative policing. But I thought I had a high regard for it, because if ESU went to a job, emergency service unit went to a job, and the guy was off the cuff, and maybe somebody that we had already visited, and now you get interviews of family members and everything else, you develop like almost a little bit of a case history, and then you could refer it back to the, to the co-response team and say, hey guys, you better follow up because this guy is off his meds, he's bonkers, and he's gonna hurt somebody. And what were the results? Well, it was a measurable amount of results because you could tell then, are there any other issues, any other types of EDP jobs at that location with that person? So it's a measurable thing as opposed to, let's say violence interrupters, where this is a measurable thing. So I don't know. Let's the mayor needs to start looking at other things, but let's not change the wheel. You don't take the police out of it completely.
Yeah.
But
can't.
but it's already been established. It's already been done. The money. Oh, and don't forget about how many millions of dollars went to Thrive NYC.
Oh, please. All right, let's welcome Juju to the night show. Juju's here tonight. An avid follower of the network, and I'm gonna read this because I don't think we're saying anything different, Juju. All right, the people blaming every tragic incident on City Hall don't actually care about the cops on patrol or the victims. If they did, they'd be demanding real psychiatric facilities, secure crisis beds, and dedicated response units so 2 patrol officers aren't left holding the bag when an unmedicated, untreated individual hits a breaking point. I think that I pretty much just said the same thing. Now, we're not blaming City Hall. That's not what we're doing here. We are criticizing the mayor. We're criticizing the mayor's lack of support of the men and women of the NYPD who did have to respond to that individual when he hit his breaking point. And what I'm saying, and I think Rob is agreeing with, is that let the mayor be critical of the system that failed this individual that allowed him to get to that breaking point. Because we don't believe it was the NYPD. The NYPD had to be there at the tragic end of this situation. And I'm a little behind. So
you can't always blame the NYPD for everything. I mean, if something got this far and the end results was a firearms discharge and somebody getting shot, you have to look at the factors that, read what led up to it. Not the results. Don't look at the results. I mean, any businessman will tell you, don't look at the results. You want to look at what led up to it so that you can make the results better next time. So, I mean, it's just basic economics here. And, you could easily apply that to the police department. But if we look back and say, oh, he went to the hospital way back when, what was the follow-up then after? What doctors allowed him to come out? What medication was he on? What type of things what was the adverse effects of the medication? Because a lot of EDPs, you talk to them and they stop taking the meds because they don't like the way they feel on them.
Right.
That makes them. So, let's start looking at it from that perspective. Let's start looking at how we can fix the problem, And should more people be put into mental institutions instead of, like I think Marlon had mentioned it earlier, like all they want to do is take people out of mental institutions. They want to take people out of jails, and then just let them roam free. What do you think the results are going to be? So I just think that the mayor needs to seriously look at what are the factors that led up to the final issue at hand. And it was not the response of the police officers that day. Definitely not.
Right. And listen, I don't know how we're on this pretty much, I think, the same page here, right? But Juju continues, as for years we've complained that the hospitals run an endless revolving door. We bring an EDP to the ER, the hospital holds them for 3 hours, pumps them full of sedatives, and discharges them. Yeah. Right. Remember, an EDP is an emotionally disturbed persons for those not in NYPD and law enforcement. Right back onto the sidewalk with zero follow-up. Mamdani, now here's where we're going to disagree a little bit. Mamdani is pushing to rebuild mental health care and supportive housing, is trying to fix the actual pipeline that puts both cops and the public in danger. Okay, but now he has this pipe. You talk about a pipeline. I think it's a pipe dream about this Department of Community Safety who's going to respond. And he wants to stick to his talking points from when he was running for mayor with this Department of Community Safety. Now, I have no problem with overhauling the mental health field, right? And looking at what are they doing? Why are they releasing people? Like you just said, maybe we need to start admitting more people for long-term inpatient care, right? I'm not talking about, just institutionalize everybody that has emotionally disturbed people. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about reopening, Willowbrook on Staten Island. I'm not talking about that. But there has to be changes in the system, and I agree with that. So I think maybe take your focus, take your finances, take the money, instead of making 3 or 4 people and spending millions of dollars for this Department of Community Safety that really is next to impossible to put into effect, where they're going to respond to certain calls, and dispatchers are going to have to decipher which call is the safe call to send the Department of Community Safety to. Again, Department of Community Safety would not go to this person. As we've all agreed to, this person was at his wit's end, at his boiling point, whatever word you want to use, where he just went off the deep end and took tragic actions that cost him his life. Again, go back to the system as to where was he failed in the system. He wasn't failed in the system by the police. So what we're saying is you need to be supportive of the police, because the police did their job. Somebody else may not have. And like you said, John, like you said, Rob, a lot of these people get medications, go through different medications to see which one's going to work, are released back out into the street because they are no longer an imminent threat to themselves or others, and then just don't take the medication because they don't want it, or they sell the medication on the street because they don't like the way it makes them feel. So now you have to go back and you have to look at, all right, so where in the system does that system need to be fixed? Because it's not at the police level. The police respond to emergency calls. We bring them to the hospital when they're a danger to themselves or others. That's where the law enforcement end stops. So now you got to look what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the police department evaluates the person and then decides whether or not they should be released outside, right? And so the thing is that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to take that individual to the hospital and to make sure that they get it either admitted or whatever, but and make sure they get the care that they need. And that's what we do, right? And we do probably, I've said in the past, I've known for, facts that there's been close between 80,000 to 100,000 emotionally disturbed jobs a year. So you're talking about, a lot of jobs that we respond to for that. And the fact is that you spoke about, sending social workers to these jobs, and clearly they would not have been sent to this one because there was a talk of a weapon. And our issue, most of our discussions has always been, there are weapons always in somebody's house, right? We're taught as police officers I don't care if it's a domestic, if it's an EDP, even if you're interviewing a victim of a crime, we don't do that in the kitchen, right? Because there's immediate access to weapons, and you don't know who you're talking to, right? So you wanna take that person out of there, especially if we're talking to a domestic case, right? Because you don't never know. Domestic cases turn ugly really fast when all of a sudden you start locking up Johnny, and Jane decides you're not taking Johnny to the jail. I love him again, and she could easily grab a weapon or anything else. It could turn seriously ugly. So the fact is that no matter what, these social workers are going to end up in a place where they're absolutely 100% could be a weapon. And not only that, it not could be a weapon, it could be a gun, a knife. It could be a bat. It could be a lot of things. And they are not prepared to deal with that at all. They're prepared for a nice, easy type of conversation. And when somebody starts to emotionally disturbed, starts to get pissed off, or starts hearing voices or anything else, it's not going to be that easy conversation that they're looking for. So, they need to look at they think they need to look at the institutions and how they classify people and how they treat people. That get to the root of the problem.
All right, let's talk about what happened here with this situation, right? So the New York Daily News reports that a 54-year-old man who advanced on police with a butcher knife after attacking his father's Lower East Side apartment was killed after 3 NYPD cops fired a total of 9 shots, police sources said. Police opened fire on the 54-year-old Wee Chan as he advanced on them inside the apartment building on Ludlow Street near Rivington Street, while ignoring repeated orders to show his hands around 4 p.m. Sunday, according to NYPD Assistant Chief Melissa Egger. And we're going to hear from her in a couple minutes. Neighbors told Daily News they heard yelling and screaming as police responded to a 911 call for an assault rushed into the building. So there you go. They responded to a 911 call for an assault. They did not respond to just an emotionally disturbed person. So let's watch the Channel 2 news coverage and see how the media is putting this.
I'm Alan Devlin. Thank you for joining us here tonight. Now, police say they were responding to reports of an assault when they encountered the armed man. Here's what we know at this hour. The shooting happened inside of an apartment building on Ludlow Street. The 54-year-old suspect who was killed by police had a documented mental health history with the NYPD. His father was hospitalized with an injury to the head. Andrew Ramos has more on the investigation from the Lower East Side.
It was just after 4 p.m. Sunday when officers responded to this apartment building at 126 Ludlow Street after multiple calls of an assault in progress. Surveillance footage shows just how quickly officers moved in.
They saw a trail of blood leading up the staircase. As they continued up the stairs, they encountered a male descending the stairs.
That man, identified as 54-year-old Wee Chan, who they say was holding a large butcher knife.
Officers repeated multiple commands for the male to show his hands.
Ignoring those orders, they say Chan continued to advance towards officers.
Officers responded and discharged their firearms, striking the subject.
Chan died at the hospital. While he had no criminal history with the NYPD, cops say he had a documented mental health history with the department. Police said Chan's 75-year-old father suffered a laceration to the head and is expected to survive. While no other injuries were reported here at the scene, responding officers were taken to area hospitals for evaluation. Now, Mayor Mamdani released a statement earlier tonight saying that there will be an internal investigation and the body-worn camera footage of the incident will be released. Reporting on the Lower East Side tonight, Andrew Ramos, CBS News, New York.
So there you go. There will be an investigation into it. There's always an investigation into it. There's always an investigation into it, right? Let's look at Mamdani's full statement on how he responded to this, right? Oh, sorry. So Mamdani's full statement. I've been briefed on the tragic events that took place this afternoon on the Lower East Side. Based on the preliminary investigation. Now, let's stop right there. He's well aware of the preliminary investigation because the Force Investigations Unit, Chief Egger, and Internal Affairs have already looked at the body-worn camera of these officers. So they know exactly what happened from the body-worn camera and are able to articulate pretty much the facts of what. Now, listen, there's going to be an internal investigation. They're going to look at 911 calls. They're going to look at the history. They're going to look at any other video cameras from the community or the neighborhood or inside the building. They're going to look for ear witnesses inside the building that heard things. All of that is normal process afterwards. But the initial investigation reveals this guy comes down the stairs, the bloody staircase, with a fucking meat cleaver, refused to show his hands, and they had to do what they had to do. Based on the preliminary investigation, NYPD officers responded to an incident an incident. He responded to an incident where a man had suffered a laceration to the head. No, where this individual cut his father's head with a meat cleaver. When the officer arrives, they instructed the man with a butcher knife to drop the weapon. Okay. He then approached the officers with the knife, and the officers discharged their firearm. Both men were taken to the nearby hospital. The man who suffered the laceration is in stable condition. I'm wishing him a full and speedy recovery. The man who officers shot was pronounced dead. As with every incident in which NYPD officers discharge their weapons, there will be an internal investigation, and body-worn camera footage of the incident will be released. Where are his well wishes for the officers that were removed to the hospital because of tinnitus? Where are his well wishes for their mental health that they were put in a situation that they had to take someone else's life? Where is his support and empathy for the NYPD? That's my question.
Yeah, obviously he doesn't care, right? He's playing towards his base. He just wants to, to get his word out or whatever. That's all he cares about. He doesn't care about the police officers. I think he's afraid, in fact, that, if he does support them, like I said earlier, his base will go against him. So he just wants to, throw that out and, the issue of mental health illness and that's it. Laceration, all that other bullshit and downplay it. But you know what? It would have been nice that he went and spoke to the officers. And if he didn't want to go that day, then go the next day. Go to roll call or whatever. Go to that command. Talk to those cops there. But I don't know. It's just it's a sad state of affair when you know that that you don't have the support of the mayor, the most important support, right? You figure if you have the support of the mayor, you're going to get this, support of the police commissioner, and there's not going to be this rift or there's any type of conflict between the two. But at this point, I feel that there's two different pages and they're playing two different ways, and it's just disheartening. It's just another disheartening thing for police officers out on patrol that they got to hear. They hear this, that the person is more concerned about the emotionally disturbed person than they are about the person that the officers that had to discharge their firearm. Great.
And I'm just gonna address Reed and Optum 44 for a second, real quick. I don't know the chief, but I feel she didn't handle the press conference well. I'm going to show you a little bit more of the press conference now, but they're not the easiest things to do. You're reading prepared statements that have been looked over by DCPI to put things out there. Some people are not comfortable in front of the camera. But I will say this, and then, Optum is saying, DEI promotion right there, LOL. No, actually, I don't know Chief Iga very well, but I do know that she's very supportive of the police, and I have heard all things that I've heard about her is that are positive, that, I've never heard that she's a DEI promotion. When you talk about DEI promotions and people that haven't earned their stripes, that I haven't heard about her. I don't know if you know anything about her, Rob.
No, I know nothing about her at all. I couldn't comment at all. I have no idea.
So, So let's look at the rest of the press conference, and then because I want to show the contrasting way that the incident is portrayed from the mayor that we just saw, how he portrayed it. But let's see how Chief Iga goes on to describe it.
I'm Assistant Chief Melissa Eager, Commanding Officer of Patrol Borough Manhattan South. I am joined by Captain Anthony Scapicchio of our Force Investigation Division and Deputy Inspector Jason Evert, Commanding Officer of the 7th Precinct. I'm here to provide an update regarding an officer-involved shooting that occurred earlier this afternoon in the confines of the 7th Precinct. The information I am about to provide is preliminary and subject to change. This incident demonstrates the courage our officers display when answering calls for help. At approximately 4:06 p.m. this afternoon, officers responded to multiple 911 calls at 126 Ludlow Street for an assault in progress. When officers arrived and entered the building, they saw a trail of blood leading up the staircase. As they continued up the stairs, they encountered a male descending the stairs towards the officers with a large butcher knife. Officers repeated multiple commands for the male to show his hands in an effort for him to drop the weapon. As officers issued repeated commands, the male continued to advance towards the officers, armed with the large butcher knife. Officers responded and discharged their firearms, striking the subject. Officers recovered the following butcher knife at the scene. This incident is depicted on body-worn camera footage. Officers on scene requested EMS, who transported the subject to Bellevue Hospital, where he was pronounced deceased. Our subject is Wei Chan, a 54-year-old male. He has no known criminal history with our department. However, he does have a documented mental health history with the department. Another victim, Chung Chan, a 75-year-old male, and our subject's father, was taken to Bellevue Hospital with a laceration to the head from our subject. He is expected to survive. Responding officers were taken to an area hospital for evaluation. This incident is being investigated by our Force Investigation Division. Again, officers entered the building, saw a trail of blood, and responded without hesitation, not knowing what was waiting for them as they went up the stairs. Their actions are a reminder of how officers run towards danger and not away from it.
So, you know, there's the difference. She's emphasizing the danger that the NYPD are put under. She's explaining what they, you know, what they were up against, and explaining how they acted in a courageous manner up against, you know, an armed assailant.
Yeah, just with the interview, and I agree with some people in the chat. You need to know the story, and it's not a hard story. Okay, you can look at the facts of whether, you know, if there's a criminal history. I wouldn't remember somebody's criminal history and everything they've been arrested for. In this case, there was no criminal history, but you need to know that, you know, to get the facts of the story and then tell the story. You don't need. I hate when people read myself. I don't need to be read to, especially at a press conference. Okay, should you look down occasionally to see where you are? Absolutely, 100%. That does not hurt. But to read every line and stop and then read the next line, that's not good. It's not good communication. It's not good speech. Did she do a good job? Yeah, she did a great job. She gave out the facts. She presented it. She was supportive of the police officers. I'll give her that 100%. But you know what? Anytime I had to do a press conference, and for the most time, it was, let's say it was a barricaded, emotionally disturbed person with a gun or whatever. I knew the story, so I went step by step by step. So, but as a duty chief or a duty inspector, duty captain, any of those things I did interviews with, get me the facts. Let me see what happened, and then you tell the story. It's best to present yourself to the media as telling a story, and that's all it is. And it's not Eddie Della tell a story. It's you got to tell the story, and it's easy. Just get the facts together and then tell them out. I mean, I know sometimes, and I don't know if this administration, but sometimes people are scared that they're going to say something wrong or they're not going to say the right thing. So have those bullet points that you want to make and then tell the story. I mean, I think that would be the easiest thing to do. So, but
No,
again, I don't know her.
No, listen,
know.
I agree that wasn't the most articulate, press conference. Better than some others where you can't even understand some of the things that they're saying, that we've heard in the past. But yeah, no, I'm with you with the same thing when you're at the podium. When you tell the story and you articulate things and you know the facts and you're familiar with them, it's the same thing at CompStat. When you're familiar with your crime trends and your patterns, you look down because you need to look at specific numbers or whatever, or look for a specific name sometimes, to make sure you don't get it wrong. But looking up and telling the story, and again, that comes with experience of standing there and doing press conferences. And I know she's done a few. This actually is not the first one that she's done. I will say that I think she's done better at other ones. At this one, she, like you said, she kind of read line for line and was a little choppy. So I don't know if she got there late and they handed her this just before they went live. But listen, you make them wait until you look it over and you get familiar with it. But the main point is that from everything I've heard, she's very competent, that she supports her people. And I think that the point being made here is that the police statement is supportive of the police. The mayor's statement is very general and, like you said earlier, maybe leading towards his base as to not seem supportive of the police, which we know he's not supportive of the police, and don't want to be supportive of the police, and just want to put out there that this happened, kind of downplay it as much as he can, and say there's going to be an investigation. There's nothing wrong with saying that there will be an investigation, there will be follow-up information that will be given. The body-worn camera, the policy of the NYPD and the city of New York is that the body-worn camera will be released once, I guess, they get permission from the district attorney, because it is, criminal evidence, right? So they'll release the body-worn camera. Saying that is not a big deal. But making that your emphasis is where I have the problem.
Well, you know what it does? It leads to the thought process of people that are unfamiliar with the process, that they're guilty. Oh, they're going to look at something. They're going to look at this. They're going to do an investigation, and you're like, oh, okay. They're going to follow through. We all know that the attorney general is going to do an investigation, right? So we know there's going to be multiple investigations, and so it's not, it's not a catch-all, and it's there's accountability for shootings, right? The grand jury, there's internally the IEB, the Firearms Investigation Division, and then of course the Attorney General's Office of New York. So you're going to get investigated, and you don't need. I don't know if you even need to say that. That should be just presumptuous that they're going to investigate this shooting and whatever. But like I said, just talk about the facts. Don't talk about you don't need to, this is what's going to happen. This was going to, everybody knows what's going to happen. Just give the facts of the shooting and express your concerns to the appropriate people that should get the expression. I don't care. You could say you feel sorry for the emotionally disturbed person that got shot and his family or whatever. Yeah. Obviously death is horrible no matter what. So yeah, you can show some compassion to that, but on the contrast, then show compassion the other side too. Just don't leave the other side blatantly out and completely out and say, yeah, we're going to investigate them. So I think that there's some things that need to really be be addressed here for the mayor, but I don't know. I don't think he's ever going to change. So
No, well, we're going to get into that, right? So, like Marlon says here, right, they really should send those chiefs to more public speaking courses. That needs to start in lieutenant school. And then especially when you get to the executive ranks, I have said that forever. They do have some courses in executive development now on public speaking. Not enough people avail themselves to it. But again, it's an art form and it comes with experience. I've talked about it. My first time at Comstat, when I was getting bombarded from the dais, I had information in front of me, but I wasn't confident enough to present it and stop them and be clear. You know, as the years went on, I have no problem stopping the chief and saying what I need to say. You know,
yeah, I would take
So-
it a step. I would take it a step lower. I would say sergeant needs to do it because you're talking in front of your squad, and then it's a learned procedure. So it doesn't hurt to start
Yeah.
early.
you got to get
And-
comfortable with it.
Huh? Yeah.
You have to get comfortable with it. It's like
Yeah,
anything
yeah,
else.
yeah. And you do with practice, you end up getting comfortable with it.
Yeah. So let's look at the SBA put out a statement on this, right? Statement from the SBA president, Vincent Fallon. Now, I'm not going to go back to the video, but this makes it appear like a sergeant went in there with the cops. I didn't see any chevrons on the 4 that went in, but whatever. They didn't say a sergeant, but the SBA put out a statement, so I'm going to assume one of those 4 people. I hate assuming, but one of those 4 people that went in the door, and maybe one of the 3 that fired was a sergeant, right? From Vinnie Vallalong regarding Mayor Mamdani's response to the recent attacks. Downplaying the immediate danger facing our sergeant and the other NYPD members who bravely quelled the threat posted by a maniac waving a butcher's knife is both irresponsible and utterly reckless. Mayor Mamdani continues sugarcoating of significant threats to public safety, sends a message that criminal behavior is condoned. It's time to stand by the men and women who risk their lives to protect this city every day. We applaud our sergeant and the other cops for their bravery. So I guess it was a sergeant that was there. I don't agree with everything Vinnie Vallalong says, but I 100% agree with this, and I think that's the whole point to this segment.
Yeah, I agree. And I also agree with like Marlon and a couple people in the chat are talking about, you could have DCPI do the press conference. There used to be like a public, a DCPI, a public information officer, a PIC that you could do those PIO and PIO. They normally would be the spokesperson all the time for the department. A standard message. The person that's familiar with it, but they reverted back to everybody. They put people up in front. I guess I don't know whether or not it's to show the emphasis of it or the rank structure or whatever. You and I were both in the department when Ray Kelly was the only spokesperson for the NYPD. I don't remember anybody. I don't remember seeing Espo even speak about it unless Kelly was away. So I think that. It is, important to have somebody that can communicate and represent the department in a good light. And I'm not saying she didn't. She did. She didn't make any mistakes. She didn't blunder or whatever. And I've seen Tish do the same. I've seen Tish talk and talk and talk. But why not have somebody that does it professionally? Why not have somebody that could have taken these courses in college or whatever else? And the reason they're in DCPI is to present it. So where is all DCPI? Where they go home at night now? I don't know. I remember them used to be working all the time, but that's a whole nother story.
They're around for 24 hours. They're there. They're at the scene there. They're the ones setting up that podium and everything else.
Yeah, that's all they're doing though.
I don't know what Juju's talking about here. If your idea of defending cops, in quotes, is hiding evidence, who's hiding evidence? Keeping the public in the dark. Again, we're making public statements and the body-worn camera will be released. And not keeping the public in the dark is also explaining to them what the officers were up against and faced upon their entry, and leaving patrol units to take the fall for broken mental health system. You're not pro-cop. I'm not sure where that comment is coming from. and then putting the facts on the table, which we did, and trusting the evidence to show why the officers had no other choice is what actual support looks like. I think that's what we're talking about. So I'm not sure. And then you're getting 100% from Marlon. Espo wasn't allowed to speak yet. Under Ray Kelly, only Ray Kelly. Ray Kelly was the spokesperson for the NYPD. One voice, and that's true. And then when Bratton 2 came in, when Bratton came in for the second time, we call him Bratton 2, right? He wanted to push it down to a more local level so that the information could get out in a more speedy manner. And that's why you still to this day hear the information you're about to hear is preliminary and subject to change. The investigation is in its infancy stages, whatever the case may be, and subject to change, because that's the thing that, you know, stops people from saying, well, you said this. Yeah, we also said that this is preliminary investigation. This is preliminary information. And that's what you're giving at an initial press conference. And you want to do that because the police just shot and killed somebody. So you have to get in front of it. You have to get out there and give this information and talk to the public and say, listen, this is what happened. It's an unfortunate situation. But it doesn't mean that if the police engagement does not appear to be initially justified, that you don't put out those facts as well. We're not saying that. We're not saying, no, you only go out there and say things if it's good. If it's a good shoot, go out there and say it's a good shoot. At the end, you're always going to say the investigation is being followed. It's being conducted by the Force Investigations Unit, which is a branch of the NYPD that was put together to do these investigations, right? So it is about transparency. And I don't have a problem with a borough commander or someone, you know, of an executive rank giving an initial briefing. Why? It doesn't have to be the police commissioner, I don't think.
Well, I think sometimes when it's a questionable shooting, they don't give all the facts anyway.
No,
So
I agree.
they don't, you know, they might be preliminary, but they might also be redacted a little bit. So, and I agree with Modern Samurai, says the public doesn't want the facts; they just want a reason to riot, and that's true. That's all they want to do. They want to give it. You know, was it bad? Was it? Let's go. You know, let's have George Soros start making the signs right away. We get that printer going so we can get out there with those nice professional signs. So I don't know. I just think that. Yeah, you could have you know, the borough commander of the voice and stuff, but I'm a bit advocate. You want people to represent the department. You want people to give speeches out, like Marlon said earlier. Train them and give them the opportunity to learn. You know, because not everyone's a great, you know, talks good speech or whatever. Not everybody can present. You know, I can remember talking at some of those the counterterrorism meetings where we had the, you know, all the representatives from throughout the, you know, the city come in. I think it was the Shields meeting, and I would have to I would have to present that, and that whole auditorium's packed. And I don't care, no matter what, how many times you did it. When you first walk up to that podium and you're ready to present, you're nervous. You're nervous, but eventually, you know, you get accustomed to it, and the nervousness goes away faster. It never goes away; it just goes away faster. So, you know, but I took speech classes in college. I didn't take anything. The department never ever gave me one freaking, you know, thing of speech. You know, you learned on your own. So I just think that if they want you to represent, and if it was my department, and I was going to say I want everybody to represent, I'm going to train you so that you represent. Bring in the greatest speech people and teachers, and instead of those bullshit, you know, all-ins where all the executives, you know, listen to, you know, counterterrorism and you know, people from information technology on how great they are. Give them a real class. Give them something that they can walk out of there and use. So that's I think the best bet, but they don't do that.
No, I get it. So let's just take a stroll down memory lane.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. And let's look back at how has the mayor responded to prior incidences, similar to this, right? Because it's not. And is he being consistent? He's actually not consistent in his messaging either, right? It's like you said earlier, he's trying to placate to his base and the DSA who get angry at him anytime he says anything positive, right? As well as trying to hold on to something with the NYPD, which is an impossible task, because as we're going to show, leopards don't change their spots, right? So let's go back to January, right? We had the shooting inside of Methodist Hospital, right? New York Presbyterian Hospital, where the man barricaded himself inside the room, was blood splattered all over the place. There was a patient and security guard in there. He refused to drop his weapon, and the police had to discharge their weapons, right? On the same day, right? The NYPD fatally shot a man who drew a fake gun in the West Village, right? There's a guy driving a BMW who's involved in an incident, right? After he drew an imitation firearm to the police. What are the police supposed to do? Excuse me, sir, can we check to see if that's a real gun? No. It was a Sig Sauer airsoft type pistol. And they had to they were put in a position that they had to discharge their firearms and unfortunately take this man's life. So, first of all, Mamdani doesn't say anything. He's radio silent. But when he does come out the next day, what are his statements? Last night's shootings in Brooklyn Methodist Hospital and in the West Village are devastating to all New Yorkers. I know many are eager for answers. The NYPD is conducting an internal investigation. I will work with Commissioner Tisch to ensure this is as thorough and swift as possible. These tragedies are painful, whether they take place steps from our homes or miles away. They are a reminder of the immense work that must be done to deliver genuine public safety work. Commissioner Tisch and I are undertaking together every day. What the fuck kind of word salad is that?
I don't know.
I just gave you a quick synopsis of what happened. You got a guy with a knife or sharp blade instrument in a room in a hospital, blood splattered all over the curtains and everywhere else. He cut himself. He's got a security guard and a patient in there that's being, held hostage, if you will. And the officers are trying to order him to disarm himself. He makes threatening motions where they have to discharge their firearm to stop the threat against themselves and the other two civilians that are in that room. And the other incident, a guy pulls a fake gun on the cops, and they gotta use deadly physical force and take a life. Again, now put their head on the pillow and think about those instances and if they could have done something different. In hindsight, knowing that it's not even a real gun, right? And this is what he says?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a bunch of bullshit that he throws out there so that people think he's, I don't know, he cares about it. He's investigating it. It's going to be swift and thorough. And I would hope that most and every investigation is swift and thorough for both sides. But it is just a bunch of rhetoric. I mean, maybe he does it so that it's so confusing that his base doesn't know if it's good or his base doesn't know if it's bad. So I don't know, but it's not necessary. We all know it's gonna play out no matter what. Those investigations are gonna take part. So I don't know. I just think it's a waste. He thinks he needs to throw something out there, throw something out with a little bit more meaning and more understanding.
Well, let's see what Tisch's statement was. Every day, the men and women of the NYPD put their lives on the line to protect New Yorkers. Last night was no different. Officers were engaged in 2 police-involved shootings, and there is every indication that their actions were nothing short of heroic. In one incident, the officers saved patients, doctors, nurses, and security guards, at a hospital from an emotionally disturbed man armed with a weapon who was threatening to kill them. Make no mistake about it, the people trapped in that room with the armed and violent subject were in imminent danger. In another incident, only a few hours later, officers were confronted by a man stepping out of a vehicle pointing at close range, just like you said before, what appeared to be a gun, and only later determined to be a 6-hour air pistol. They acted to save their own lives and the lives of other civilians, as they should. In these tragic cases, as with every police-involved shooting, the NYPD will conduct an exhaustive investigation and review. I am eternally grateful today and every day for the noble men and women of New York City Police Department. What's wrong with that statement?
Well, I don't like the adjective that's put in exhaustive. You just say it's going to be an investigation and review. That's it. That's the only thing I don't like about you, because it adds to it. Just it's going to be an investigative and review, but everything else is transparent. It's supportive. So I think that, I don't know why the mayor can't do that. Why the mayor can't do that is also, and if I'm the mayor, you know what? I have to care about the people and the citizens of New York. So I might put a two-liner in there, my condolence, and I'm not putting to fault of the individual, but I would say my condolences go to the family, no matter what, it's a tragic loss of a loved one or whatever, but that's it. I'm not gonna say that, the actions were, led to it or whatever, or it's going to be investigated. But I'm not going to say, that the person's at fault, the person's, shot or whatever. But I'm just saying that you can run both sides of the fence, as most politicians do, and it'll come out sounding good. But if you're just going to weigh on one side and leave the men and women of the NYPD and the rank and file that are keeping everybody safe in the city, then it's gonna fall on hard ears, because nobody wants to hear that bullshit. Nobody wants to hear that there's no support.
Yeah. I mean, he's supporting men and women, because the mayor, I still don't even know what he said there. And again, we'll go to young, immature, inexperienced, never had a real job, even in governing. What he did, vote on 3 or put out 3 bills or something, whatever. And then you talked earlier about, you mentioned the shooting in Queens, and the victim's name is I'm can't think of it at the moment, but this was the EDP job. The cops went there. We talked about this at length on the job, right? On the show, rather, and showed the body-worn camera video of these officers who did everything they could to avoid a lethal confrontation with this individual, where he was coming at them with a knife from the kitchen, where they actually closed the door, tried to create a barrier between the two of them. He pulled the door open, was coming at them with the knife. They were caught in the vestibule, and the one officer had to discharge his firearm and shoot the individual to stop the threat. Now, that individual did not die. But when you look at that body-worn camera, it's clear as day that they did everything they could, at least in our perspective. They did everything that they could, including retreating, like we talked about before, that they have no duty to do. But they did retreat and try to create a barrier between them before having to use deadly physical force. And what was his answer back then? I've been briefed on an officer-involved shooting in Queens that occurred earlier today. The NYPD responded to a 911 call where they encountered an individual wielding a knife. The NYPD is assessing the situation, and we are committed to keeping New Yorkers informed as we learn more. Well, they learned a lot more prior to the statement. I'm grateful for the first responders who put themselves on the line each day to keep our community safe. I don't think he's grateful. And yet, thanks for nothing, because you're not telling the story there. He wasn't just wielding a knife. He was coming at them, violently coming at them. And like I said, ripped the door open and tried to get through and get to him.
Yeah, I thought he took some ribbing from his base about that too, but you know, but when you know, I mean, at least it showed a little bit of support, so I'll give him that, but not a great amount, but a little bit. But you know, I don't know. That's all I can say about that one. You know,
And
he
then
doesn't.
you
He
had
doesn't.
go ahead. What was that?
I was gonna say he doesn't want to show support. He probably learned, you know, when his base starts pushing back on him, he's learned that he can't show support, and that's why you see, uh, you know, all these other ones where there's absolutely nothing. You know, there's no concern at all for the police.
You know, and Housing for Life says it. You know, didn't the Zohan visit that guy in the hospital? Yeah, that's another thing. He went and visited him in the hospital because he was an emotionally disturbed person. And again, the Department of Community Safety should have responded to that job. Now, that job came over as an EDP. So there's a possibility that the Department of Community Safety might have responded to that job. And we talked about this at the time on our show, right? But it's also a perfect example of how a regular EDP job, right, emotionally disturbed person job, can turn violent in a split second. Now, did the NYPD uniform trigger him? We don't know. Had the whatever type of uniform they're going to wear, Department of Community Safety responded to that situation? Is it possible that he wouldn't have went at them, or would he have still seen them as an authoritarian figure and still attacked them? We'll never know. But that's a question. And yeah, he did. He visited them in the hospital. He also pleaded with the Queens District Attorney, who filed charges for attempted murder on a police officer, to drop the charges, and stated that they should be removing the handcuffs from him. So here's someone that comes after the police with a knife, and you're saying there should be no criminal ramifications. Now, if he is found not fit for trial because of mental health intervention, that's what the criminal justice system is for. Not for the mayor to get on his pulpit and say, because he's got a mental health history, he should have no consequences for criminal behavior.
Well, that's insane because hey, that's insane. That's insane because yeah, there is a mental justification to certain things, mental illness, right? So, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all the charges are dropped. You know, you can still charge an emotionally disturbed person with a crime and let them, you know, justify their actions, or, you know, clinically prove their actions in the court of law that, you know, they were mentally insane, or there was a mental defect or whatever. But that's not up to us. You know, that's not up to the mayor. That's not up to the police department. If emotionally disturbed the person does something that's of a criminal nature, there you could still arrest somebody and then allow them to, you know, bring that justification up to the as a defense in the court of law, and that's it. And then usually, I think somebody mentioned it before. I don't know if it was Reed or somebody else, but you know, Reed's putting a lot of great comments in there. But mentioned earlier that, you know, let them, you know, as part of their prosecution, they're to serve a certain amount of time in a mental institution. Okay. AKA David Berkowitz, right? So David Berkowitz isn't in a regular jail. He's in a psychiatric prison. So since we have psychiatric prisons, that means that somebody didn't know or whatever their mental status when they did the job and did the crime, and the judge found them still guilty of the crime, and they had to serve their sentence in a mental institution. So, you know, the court, let the court determine that. Like Hunter's saying right there, the court determines it was a 7:30 exam. I'm not familiar with that, but if I believe you. So yeah, let the court decide. We don't decide that. Let the court decide.
No, I agree 100%. So let's just real quick, just remind people, um, you know, about, his past statements. This is in 2020. We don't need an investigation to know that the NYPD is racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety. What we need to is to defund the police, to defund hashtag defund the NYPD. But your deal with New York City mayor uses budget tricks to keep as many cops as possible on the beat. No fake cuts to fund the police. 2022, during his re-election campaign platform for state assembly, writing on his campaign website, he stated, "We need to dramatically curtail the power and presence of the NYPD," and asserted that the NYPD cannot reform our way out of a racist police system that's working exactly as designed. And in August 2023, let's not forget that he writes in a speech, he says, right, to the Democratic Socialist American Convention in Chicago, Mamdani remarked that when the NYPD's boot is on someone's neck, it has been laced by the IDF, right, the Israeli Defense Force. So this is who he is. This is who he is. He hasn't changed. He's just got to try to play a little nice, right? Try to play a little nice in the sandbag, in the sandbox. But the truth of the matter is, that's not what it's about. That's not what he's about.
Yeah, I disagree that he's even playing nice. What he's doing is he's throwing a magic carpet over it, and he's pretending to everybody who he is. He's not. He has an alternative, thought in his head. He has his own agenda, and he just wants to keep the peace right now, while he totally and completely undermines the NYPD and kills everybody else in the city of New York and ruins the city in itself. So there's a plan, but he's doing it diplomatically. He's what was the old saying? You keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. And I think that's exactly what he's doing. He's a magic carpet ride right there. You're muted, Ron. You're muted.
I did a Marlins. I was bringing up a video and it started playing in the background, so I wanted to kill my mic. I did a Marlin. I think somebody said a little early, beating this one to death. I think we got the point across that we don't have a supportive mayor. John saying crime is down. We're gonna talk about that a little bit, right? But perception versus reality. You have this person that's out there, and he attacks his father and goes to attack the cops, and this is the result. Unfortunately, this is the result. It's terrible. It's the whole thing, and I think what John's point when he said crime is down is, they're trying to do perception management. So if he downplays it and he talks about the person with the laceration and then the police had to discharge their firearm and blah 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 blah, that's going to downplay it in the eyes of everybody else, instead of saying the truth of the matter, that there was somebody who may have been failed by the system that got into a situation that cost him his life, and that the police had to take appropriate action. And he's refused to say that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not so sure that's the real John D. McCary, though, but I agree.
You don't think that's John? Why don't you think?
No, I think that's a fake John D. McCary. I'm sorry, but
he's made comments before. He was going back and forth with.
We'll have to find out. I don't know.
It's me. He's saying it to me. 1,700
Yeah.
911 calls missed last night. Took 6 hours to figure it out.
All
I'm
right.
not sure what that. I don't know. I didn't see anything on that, John. What's that?
I need a text from John to verify that's him because he's usually on his X post. So I'm skeptical.
I know. We're actually getting a view from him tonight on he's in YouTube tonight. And he was breaking balls with Nolan before, so it's
yeah,
John.
I ain't buying it. I'm not buying it. Sorry.
Hey, listen, let's move on. We're an hour and 36 minutes into this. We have over 300 people watching across the different platforms. We appreciate all the support. He's going to text you now. As we've said in the past, I'm looking here. We have over 200 people watching on X. We encourage you, go over to at The Finest Unfiltered on YouTube. As you can see, we're very interactive with the chat. Some serious, some joking around. The chat gets involved. We get to know people in the chat, which is going to come into play in a minute. So if you can, come over to YouTube. We get the views. It'll help us with the algorithm as well. We appreciate all the support as always. And like Terry says all the time, hit that like, share, subscribe button. And when you're watching the show later, if you're watching the show on the recorded episode, go where the comments are, where you can post a comment, and hit that hype button for us. It'll bring it up in the algorithm. We really appreciate that. Let's move on to the next topic, Rob.
Okay.
So the New York City Council has passed a bill. We'll see if Mamdani will sign it. Basically stating that the NYPD was going to have to release data for shootings in which no one was struck. In other words, as the police call it, shots fired, right? So it's talked about often that, crime is down, crime statistics, don't match what people are seeing on a day-to-day basis. And
all right, listen, breaking news. That is verified. That is John D. McCarry. All right. So he's the man. I got you.
All right. So we appreciate you being here with us, John. John's, for those that watch our show and don't watch the New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 0805 on the network. John is the godfather. He's the originator, the original host of the show, and then Eric Dim came on, joined him as a co-host, and now Fire Detective Marlon Bethel is the third co-host on that show. So check that show out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 0805 on this network. We're on the Finest Unfiltered network, and we're the Executive Perspective. They're the New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast. So that's who John is for those who like who's John D. McCarry in the chat today. Anyway, so this New York City Council comes up with this bill. It's a bipartisan bill that was co-sponsored by Oswald Feliz, who's a Democrat, and Joanne Ariola, who's a Republican here in Queens. And it was unanimously passed by the City Council. Now, we don't agree with the vast majority, probably 99% of the things that come out of the City Council when it comes to law enforcement and the NYPD. They're not very pro-police. But this bill, really, I don't see anything negative about this bill. As a matter of fact, I don't even think it's specific enough in how the reporting needs to get done. I think they could actually have requested even a better breakdown of the shots fired incidences, and not necessarily even quarterly. It could have been monthly, but it's only required quarterly. And so, police in a typical day respond to at least several shooting incidents that don't involve someone actually wounded. Shot spot alerts and 911 calls generate a majority of such responses, with police officers or often witnessing or hearing a gun being fired. If video can't be located and there's no ballistic evidence found at the scene and there is no reliable witness, the job gets marked unfounded. Now, that's another instance. We could talk a little bit about that, as we go on, about not properly recording, because we believe, I think we're all in agreement that all crimes are not being, number one, reported, number two, properly recorded. But we're going to get into how things get recorded in the crime complaint database. And the job is actually pushing back, saying it's not so easy. What was your thoughts when this came out?
Well, I know that John Marlin and Eric had spoken about it on their podcast, and I agree that what I was disappointed about was the fact that the city council had to put a law out, how to put this into legislation to say that you have to report this, you have to then I just think that it should have been done all along. And I know as a young police officer, I responded to a lot of, shots fired. You'd hear those jobs all the time. And eventually you went to the job, and the way I always took it, you did a UF 61, which is a universal form 61, or a complaint report. And you would write on the top of the complaint report, investigate shots fired. And if there was ballistics evidence, if there were shell casings or whatever, you would voucher them, and you would close the complaint report out to patrol, because there was probably no further investigation. But had there come up with a homicide, or somebody was shot later on, you had some ballistic evidence and stuff like that. So I just don't know the reason why you have to put a bill out for this. This should have been the way it should have been done all along. I do remember, though, going on jobs and shots fired, and then when you got there, there was nothing there. And back in those days, right, in the early days, I came on in '87. So back in the early days of late '80s, the early '90s, there was no enhanced 911 system, so somebody could make an anonymous call, right? It wasn't traceable. You didn't know where it came from, and they essentially used to say, anonymous and unverified, because the person would call, the shots fired at Seneca and Hunts Point, and they'd hang up, and that was it. So you respond there, and there may have been shots fired there, but you had no knowledge or information to go anywhere further. So that was either a 90Y, unnecessary, or a 90Z, gone on arrival, or a 90X, unfounded. Those are the three standard dispositions you would give for that job. So, so I don't know if everything back then, everything was intraceable, because you didn't know, right? You couldn't verify that. But now, these days, where there's, the shot spotters, even though I'm sure we could talk about some of the shot spotters that have gone down, the shot spotters and things that verify the actual shots, and now the enhanced 911 system. When somebody makes a call, you have a callback, right? And sometimes on the way to the job, you would say, "Hey, Central, get a callback, and you get a description, get anything else," and you would ask for that stuff. And then when you got there, then you would see, if there's ballistic evidence or whatever, you could do that. So it was more. I think it's more trackable now. And I don't know why they stopped tracking. Well, I do know why they stopped tracking it, but optics and crime, reporting. But so
I'll tell a funny story in a few minutes about that. But I don't think they've stopped recording it. It's just a matter of the presentation, and here they're mandated.
Right. Yeah. Where is it recorded?
Right.
I remember on the crime sheet, it used to be shots fired. And Reed's asked me when I was in the 4-1 from '88 to '93. But where was it? It used to be the shots fired and the shooting incidences and things like that. We used to be on the complaint report, not the complaint report, on the ComStat information. So, but I don't, what happened with those 61s? Did they actually get recorded?
Here's a classic story. Just as a quick aside, I was on a crime scene with my partner. Now, Housing for Life's an old school guy. Used soda cans to mark the rounds. Fell asleep in the RP, and a bum came by and took the cans. True story. Did he leave the rounds behind for you at least? Oh, that's funny. All right, but yeah. So the NYPD's response to this bill, right? Department said that that compiling shots fired data is not as straightforward or as accurate as shooting victims and shooting incidents. It can be recorded in different ways. So what they're saying is, listen, a shooting victim, you have a body with a hole in it from a bullet. Shooting incidents, for those of you to clarify, a shooting incident is an incident where one or more people are struck by bullets. So you could have 10 shooting incidences with 15 shooting victims. Those are the people with the holes in them. Okay? As it can be recorded in different ways. The NYPD also said in a statement that the data provides the clearest and most complete picture of gun violence in New York City. I disagree with that statement completely, because they provide information on the people that were shot. And there's so much more to it. When guns are being discharged, just because someone doesn't get hit doesn't mean that a violent act hasn't occurred. And even if someone wasn't being shot at, it's a propensity for violence in that area, because that means that there is a live weapon being fired that is in the area that could harm someone. So it is information that you need to know.
Yeah, I mean, when you talked about that job in Staten Island, right, where somebody pulled up in front of somebody's house and started shooting at the house, and I know John refers to it all the time, they made it a reckless endangerment. No, that's not a reckless endangerment. When somebody's shooting at your house, there's something more than going on. So, to hide things like that is ridiculous. And why wouldn't you want to provide? I mean, I look at Jessica Tisch, and she's very data driven, right? She did good in information technology. I think there was a couple glitches with the cell phones, but she was able to work through that. So why, if you're not data driven, why wouldn't you want the most data? Why? Because it could give the perception that things aren't as good as they are.
Right.
So Marlon invented these words from one of the first podcasts I ever watched with Marlon was perception management. Right? We want to make everything look, and we'll manage the perception so everything looks great. And it continues to this day. If I'm the police commissioner, I want that data, and I want to be able to provide it out to people so that they know areas of concern. And you know what? That helps with a couple other things. That helps with witnesses. That helps with prevention. Right? Now I can deploy appropriately. So, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with data, but, don't hide the data, use the data.
Right. So here's what Oswald Feliz, Councilmember Feliz, said after the bill was passed. Just listen, this is real quick.
Data on gun violence in our city. As we know, currently the NYPD provides data regarding shooting victims and also shooting incidents. But the shooting incidents data only covers the incidents when someone is struck, which means if there's a shooting and no one is struck, there's no data provided on that. We need that data so that we could get a clear and full picture on the issue of gun violence in our city, also so that we could be able to track the progress on the issue, and so we could be able to determine where the resources are needed.
I don't have a problem with what he said. At all.
Sounds good.
So we talk about information technology. We talk about crime data collection. We talk about all of this. And so, when you think about that, you think about crime analysis, right? Which is what it is. And so one of our viewers, one of our listeners, who's an avid fan, an avid supporter of the network, Mike Freed. We've spoken, you know, he's in the chat constantly. He's put it out there. He comes under his own name. He's talked about his career and that, you know, he did crime analysis in the command that he worked in. So I said, hey, listen, you know what? Since we're talking about compiling data and the job is trying to say that it can't be done, let's bring somebody, because listen, I can talk about it, you can talk about it. We talked about it from the executive level, and we talk about the things that we requested, the reports that we worked off of that our crime analysis unit put together for us, right? Let's talk to somebody that actually did the work. So let's welcome to the stage a special guest and supporter of the Finest Unfiltered Network, retired police officer Mike Freed. Welcome, Mike.
Welcome. How are you?
How's
Hey,
everything
Mike,
going?
how's it going?
Good. There's a database for everything. You should know that.
Yeah.
Just to answer one thing, Rob, you were talking about on the CompStat sheet. I think, as far as I remember, it was just shootings and victims. They never had the shots fired on the CompStat sheet, as far as I remember. I know we just did like a basic report that we would send to the borough and everything like that. So, but
Yeah, no,
also,
I think you're right. I think I was thinking of, like, I think it was
Internal
shootings
report.
and shooting incidences, right? That's what it was. But yeah, you're right. There was no such thing as shots fired.
and
Right,
I
but
think there was something with brass too. It's just I'm trying to remember offhand, because going to this report, because I've been saying since 2014, 2015, when I would see something like, we'd have like 30, 40 shootings for the year, 50, 60 victims. But then when you look at the shots fired jobs, because you're looking at the confirmed and unconfirmed. So I'm looking at what the squad has, what ECT has, and what we have. You're talking about, at that time, we probably had, if people were actually shot, we'd at least have maybe 10 or 15 more shootings added to the sheet. Now, with the way that everything is, you probably could double that, triple that, the way that things are.
Right. And again, we're not talking about shootings. A shooting, to get the nomenclature correctly, right? Again, a shooting is an incident where someone is physically hit by a bullet.
Right.
Okay? That's what counts as a shooting incident. And you could have an incident where multiple people were shot. That's why they carry two different columns of shooting incidences and then shooting victims. So you know how many people were shot in how many instances, and there's always a comparison between the two. But like what I think Rob was alluding to was that when we were executives and we used to have to present at the borough level and at the CompStat level, we would have to present this other information, this other empirical data on shots fired. The shot spotter report of how many shot spotter incidents there were and what the dispositions were from those incidences, right? We talked earlier, Mike, right, about the 911 report for shots fired. Now, I don't like that number. I don't like that data being produced, because it's very inaccurate, because anybody that hears a car backfire could say, 911, I just heard a shot being fired outside.
Yeah,
especially
200,
June to
200
July, every fireworks job is coming over as a 911 job for, not everyone, but a lot of 911 jobs for shots fired are actually fireworks, right? But that's what part of Shot Spotter was supposed to do. Shot Spotter, the technology was supposed to take out that car backfire noise and be able to, through artificial intelligence, discern that it wasn't an actual shot being fired. And the same with the fireworks, right? So you have these things. And the story, Rob, what I was going to tell before when you brought it up about Shot Spotter was, what I find is funny is that we're talking about, oh, why don't the police department want to release this data? The data's there, and we're part of bringing Mike on is to show that, you know, through this information collection system called Cognos, right, where it's a data collection system that pulls data from all the other areas, from complaint reports, from 911 calls, from arrest reports and everything else, and compiles the data, is that it's there and it's readily available. Why does the department want to put it out? Because then that perception that all these shootings are down and shots fired, you know, I mean, shooting incidents and shooting victims are down, which may be true, because I think it's very hard to hide the bodies. But when you bring in the data of actual physical firearms being shot in an area, that changes people's perception, and it should, because it's a misinformation by not producing that data, because you're not letting people know that, hey, you're in an area that guns are being fired. We use that data all the time at the local precinct level, right, to figure out our deployment. Now, the funny story before I get into the deployment part of it is, I remember being at CompStat, and one thing about ShotSpotter, right? ShotSpotter is where they put up these microphones in communities, and it triangulates the area and can tell you almost to an exact location where the sound of the shot was produced to send the police. And there's a recording of it embedded in the 911 call. So if you get a ShotSpotter call, you can go to your department smartphone and actually listen to that ShotSpotter activation. And I remember going to CompStat and being questioned by someone who's now the chief of department when he was in crime control strategy, saying, hey, Ron, let's listen to this and tell me why this was 90X. And you listen to it, and clear as day, anybody that knows anything knows that was shots being fired. But now we don't want to put that data out there, right? Now that I don't think they mind that it was 90X, which is unfounded. Rob, what do you?
See, to me, is it really the upper echelon of the NYPD, or is it Mamdani? Because if Mamdani agrees to this, then it's going against what he wants. It's showing that there is more violence out there, and where are all these cops? I remember also part of the report, back in the day, that helped with what the impact overtime that we used to do for IRT over, impact and whatever that other overtime was all because of this information. So it was out there, and then now I don't know.
The information is still there, and that's the point. The point is that the information is there. And listen, I don't think Mamdani, he can veto this all he wants. This passed unanimously in the city council. They have the supermajority to overturn his veto. So now he's up against, well, do I want to put this information out there that makes, my public safety look a little worse? Like, it's not as safe as we're putting out there to the public with this perception, as opposed to, his base where, dude, he's going to get overturned. He's going to get overturned.
And they got to show the map. They got to show the maps for this too.
Well, they'll show the areas where these specific things are fired. And to Rob, anything on this so far?
No, I just my question is brass catcher still done? Because with these shots fired and the shot spotters, is there a collection of evidence at these particular locations? Shot spotter is great. What I read about it, I have no intimate knowledge of it, but what I read about it was that it can decipher between fireworks, a car backfiring. It particularly picks up, specifically gunshots and records them as such. So but I'm not very familiar with that. But what I'm asking is does anybody know, does brass catchers still exist? Do police officers still respond, collect spent shell casings and voucher them. And then there's usually a comparison done by the lab to determine whether or not a gun, shot off in the Bronx was also involved in a homicide in Brooklyn. But there's a lot of technology, and I don't know why it hasn't expanded, and why they're allowing it to be, if there's there's problem with it and it kind of not working, why not get it fixed? Those are the questions I have relative to ShotSpotter.
Yeah, I don't see how they could do away with the brass catcher. And for those who aren't familiar, brass catcher is when they do, like you said, collect the evidence of the shots that were fired, and it goes to the lab, and the rifling, if it's a bullet, or the shell casing, the strike on the firing pin is all identifiable to one specific gun, and it goes into a database. And they could say that, hey, this gun matches a shooting over here, and they can follow the bouncing ball of the gun and tie it into multiple incidents and locations. I can't see that investigative tool, Rob. I understand what you're saying, where, are they doing less to, to show what's really going on out there? Are they suppressing evidence, like someone said earlier in the chat? I can't see. I'm the eternal optimist, I guess, right? We say that often, right?
I don't see it either, because that's the only way you can confirm an actual shots fired job. And, even though it's not an assault like you were explaining, it's still on the sheet to show that could have been an assault. That's why I was saying, we might, shooting, we might have had 20 shootings, but if you have another 10 confirmed shots fired with brass, that would have probably been an extra 10 shootings in general with a few victims.
I can't tell you how many times I would go on a shooting, and the victim would be very uncooperative and not tell you where they were shot, what the location, even what the possible motive of why they're particularly shot. But then based on shell casings and evidence, and I would think now even ShotSpotter, you can kind of pinpoint things. When you go interview that person in the hospital, it kind of can lead back to the incident. So I don't know why they're so. I mean, I understand why they're so afraid of it. The other thing is you're putting out 2 or 3 sectors in a car. I mean, in a precinct, right? I could see where, and somebody mentioned it earlier. Hey, there's 3 shell casings over there, and then you slowly, let me move them over. I get them out of the street with my boot. Oops, they went in the sewer. The next thing you know, there's no more shell casings to voucher, so that I don't have somebody get stuck, doing the vouchering for an hour or two and lower the amount of people on patrol. So I think there's a lot of things that are being hidden right now. And Mike, I agree. It may be Mamdani, doing it because he doesn't want to give the perception that it's worse. He wants crime down. He wants crime down without being really a crime fighter. So I can kind of see exactly what you're saying, Mike. I totally agree with you.
So I'm just trying to do something on the side here, but one of the things that they're saying, right, is that it's not so easy to get this information and correlate this information. And because, like they've said, and I thought I had it, and I'm trying to find it. I had a John Shell response. Oh, here it is. Hold on. So John Shell responded to this. And let me bring it up to the stage here.
I think George H 3298. That's hilarious. Heard a ping, felt a sting, didn't see a thing. That's hilarious.
Oh, so here's what John Shell responds to Council Member Feliz's X post on this. Shots fired calls are tracked on a complaint report. You can track them simply by 911 calls which, okay, but again, I think that isn't an honest representation of true shots fired. I think you have more 911 calls, right? And confirmed shots fired are recorded. What are we talking about here? Just ask for the stats. Complaint reports are for investigate shots fired when there's ballistics, witness, etc. Criminal mischief for property damage, reckless endangerment when it's into the air on a roof, right? And attempted assault when they're shooting at someone. The classifications could be audited, but they are recorded. Just because shots occurred and ballistics recovered does not necessarily mean someone was shot at. The detectives have clearance rates on shots fired. Damn, I will send you my old reports. And then he tagged Bob Holden. But I agree with John Schell. I agree. And these calls are recorded in several different ways, right? I was in housing, right? Housing Flag will tell you. A lot of times you'll get a shots fired job, or you'll just be doing a directed patrol, a vertical up to the roof, and you'll find shell casings. What are they from? A lot of times people are purchasing a weapon and they go up to the roof of the housing development and they shoot the gun up to make sure that the gun is the gun works. Other times they're just playful gunfire, right? Celebratory gunfire, shooting the gun into the air. Doesn't mean it's not as dangerous. Shooting at streetlights to take the lights out so that it's darker in the area so that they can commit other crimes. Maybe a robbery, a larceny, sell drugs. So it's not as well lit. Cameras won't pick it up from community or whatever. And there's other times, and I remember in Comstat, I remember when the pendulum swung and they started making us take complaint reports for attempted assault, because prior to that pendulum swinging, every time, if there wasn't a body attached and you had a confirmed shots fired, it was reckless endangerment. Someone recklessly fired a weapon. If no body was attached. And that's wrong, because if you have somebody saying I was being shot at, or you have a car that was shot into when there's people in the car, or a house where there's people in the house and people are shooting into the house, as not recklessly is, a shot is fired somewhere and it just happens to go through a window, right? That's not maybe an attempted assault. But if you're firing into someone's house, you're trying to hurt someone. That's an attempted assault. And they had to be recorded as such. Now, the scrutiny, and Mike can attest to this, the scrutiny on that and the legitimacy of that being accurately depicted in the statistics, it can be questionable. And the point is, Mike, you worked with Cognos when you were in crime analysis, right?
Yeah.
When you're in Cognos, you can query things by almost anything, by catchphrases, by partial descriptions, by putting in keywords, right? So, do you want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, just doing that, and just, you just match. It takes time, but you got to match. Like I said, you match the 61s, you match whatever the squad has, with the shootings. A lot of back in the, I don't remember the shots, being shot into the house going as the assaults, the attempted assaults. I just remember still the investigated shots fired and the reckless endangerment. So that's how,
the whole point with that was if it's being fired at someone, it's no longer a reckless endangerment. It's now, rightfully so, an attempted assault, because they're attempting to shoot someone. They're not just recklessly firing a gun, right?
And
they're not recklessly firing a gun. If they're firing it at a person, huh?
I'm going to do my crime analysis bit and say, how do you even know that they're actually shooting at a person?
Well, if you have a complainant, that says I was being fired upon, or there's video everywhere, security video. You go and do a video canvas, and you see on an Argus camera, on someone's security camera, on a Viper camera, or any other type of camera that's out there, because there's cameras everywhere, a Ring camera on someone's house, and you see somebody running down the street. We see it every day, Mike, on social media. People running down the street shooting at the other group. Sometimes they get hit and they go down. Other times they miraculously get missed by 3 people running with guns. That's not reckless endangerment, Mike. That's an attempted assault.
That I know.
And I see what Mike's saying. If Mike's my crime analysis guy, I'm saying thanks, Mike, because I'm not taking an attempted assault, which is one of the 7 majors, and you're putting it on, and they just shot at somebody's house. That's a crime strategy in my eyes. Hey, did they shoot at the house? How did they know the guy was home? I don't know. He was just shooting at the house. All right, I'm going to go with the and that's what I think a lot of this commanding officers would say that's reckless endangerment. I'm not taking an attempted assault.
I agree.
Right, Mike? Come on.
No, I know,
Right.
but
And that's how it used to be. But then they did change it. There was a shift where if there's evidence that there was an attempted target, it had to be an attempted assault. That's my point. Did it happen every time? Was it recorded properly? No. Is it recorded properly today? 100% no. And Mike, you were in crime analysis, right? Were you ever, pressured not to upgrade crimes that you were reviewing and you said, this sounds like it's a robbery. This sounds like it's a grand larceny. This sounds like it's a, attempted assault.
Yeah. I got in trouble for upgrading stuff. So.
No. Yeah. Everybody did.
Which isn't right. If you gotta mute yourself and go, you gotta go. Let us know.
Hello. Yeah.
Let me mute him.
The poor cops got in trouble for upgrading, right?
That's completely wrong.
I know it's wrong, but that's what it was. That's what it was, So they would easily,
100%.
That's unless somebody, I can remember, robberies, assault, everything being downplayed. We used to have a lot of in the 2-3. There was a lot of Mexican parties on the weekend, and the one thing I can say from my personal observations is the Mexicans are very, very hard workers, but they are very, very hard partiers too. And the problem is they would get drunk and they would start stabbing each other, and most of the time it was I don't want to press charges, I don't want anything else. So that was okay. That's not a 61 then. That's a 90Y, unnecessary. Go on your way. But
there's definitely more of that going on now. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I think there's not only pressure, as we saw from that transit district commander who got caught, right? Because he was so blatant about it. I'm sure it's happening elsewhere. There is pressure not to report crime. There's also a lack of empathy by the police. There's also laziness out there, improperly trained members of the service that are going out there and not taking complaint reports for many reasons, because they're lazy, because they don't want to do the work, because they may get shit from their sergeant, their lieutenant, or their captain. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that doesn't happen out there. 100% that happens out there. What I'm saying is this data is readily available. The whole shit canning of 61s is a topic for another day. It absolutely happens. But the point to this is that it's not difficult at all to correlate this data and be able to report it. And sometimes they're being recorded, like we said, attempted assault, reckless endangerment, confirmed, investigate shots fired, whatever the classification could be. It's also not difficult in the crime classification guidelines and in the Omni system, right, which is the complaint reporting system, to change something, to add a check mark that no matter what the crime is being classified as, it's very easy for ITB to change the complaint reporting system to add a check mark of was a firearm discharged on this job? And just check it off. And I know that that's possible because in part of my police management institute, when I went to PMI, my project was on small electronic theft, and my group, and we did the report. And one of the guidelines, one of the things that we brought back as a recommendation, right, was that the job wants you to run the IMEI number on every phone that comes into you come into contact with. The only people that could do that at the time was the squad. It wasn't available to the rank and file. And when we did our presentation to the police commissioner and the executive corps in the police commissioner's conference room, you know, Rob, you're very familiar with that from all your briefings up there, right? When we did our presentation, Chief Pulaski was the chief of detectives at the time, and he said, Ron, you and the guys stand by after the meeting. We went up to his office. He says, show me what you're talking about. I told him. He called his lieutenant in. His lieutenant was the guy who was kind of like the guru of the Omni system. Literally, the next day, it was changed job-wide so that you could run the IMEI number at the local, down low, any police officer could run the IMEI number level. It was changed like that. So to add a check mark is nothing in order to be able to compile this data, and then you could run a query on all shots fired jobs. And you could have it broken down like we break down everything else by day of the week, by platoon, by hour of the platoon, right? It could be broken down like you break down grand larcenies by what type of property and what type of larceny it is, from the person, from the vehicle, from a construction site, and all these other subcategories. And you could have a shots fired report by the press of a button that breaks down that shots were fired X amount of times in this 28-day period, where it was an investigate shots fired, it was a reckless endangerment, it was an attempted assault, it was a person shot. And you could have,
that's in Cognos.
In Cognos, you could do that. That's what I'm saying. You could do that. And you could put it in as a daily run. I got my complaint reports and my arrest reports sent to me at 6 o'clock every morning. Automatically. Because it was a recurring report that is just self-generated within the Cognos system. You don't have to go in every day and do this. You do it once. You put the parameters in once, it self-generates. That's why I'm saying they want it quarterly. They could do this weekly with the Comstat sheet if they wanted to. That's my point.
So, yeah, it sounds to me they don't want the numbers. That's why there's a little pushback. So it's gonna indicate. But you know what? You know, if they want to lower their shootings and stuff, that's a great way to do it. They'll find out where people are, you know, shooting and missing, or doing celebratory gunfire, or checking their weapons. You and I showed a great video where, you know, the drone operator caught the guys on top of a housing development, right, with their guns in their still on their person. So I mean, there's ways to all work this together. I don't know. I still, to this day, I'm going to say it again. I said it earlier in the podcast. I don't know why. Hey, could it spike in the beginning? It could look bad. Yeah. But then you could easily manage it, and you could look like a rock star, because you've quelled even more shootings and you've taken more guns off the street. So I don't know why they're so hesitant to do this. And yeah, quarterly does shit for me. Okay, what does that do? I can't go back 4 months or 3 months and decide, you know, now I'm going to make a difference, you know. And I say 4 months because I'm going to get my quarterly report on my 4th month, right? I'm not going to get it on the end of the 3rd. So why am I going to do that? I'd rather have that as a weekly crime sheet and or Comstat sheet, and get that information.
We used to do that for the blast and the grand larceny report. We used to do that. Used to run the program in Cognos and Gaslight, and then put the numbers Monday through. It gives you everything, the time frame. That's why I'm saying I believe you you do that with shootings. It's just, they just don't want the public to know. Back in the day, I know everyone wanted it out there, and now no one wants it out there.
Right. Oh, it's sad that is, like I said earlier, it's sad that a city council has to put a bill forward to request this information. And personally, I don't know why. I guess the mayor, this is my personal opinion now, I guess the mayor is going to say, maybe talks to the police commissioner or somebody else and go, what will be the perception of the people if we show all these shots fired? And then it's going to be, oh, well, the perception is it's an unsafe city and there's a lot more guns out there than we really realize. So he says, all right, don't do it then. Tells Tish don't do it, since we know that she could. And then it takes the city council to put a bill forward to say, we're mandating that you do it because you're hiding something from us, etc. I think it should have just been done from the get-go. Like I said earlier, it would have been a great PR, public relations thing where you put this out. Look how bad this shooting, especially since it's early in his term, right? So we're literally 8 months into it. He could have said, look, this is what I've discovered. This has never been reported. It wasn't reported on the Adams. It wasn't reported on de Blasio. I'm going to report this. It's going to be high, but you know what? This is going to be a way and a means for us to reduce it even further. And then he would look like a hero, but he's a stupid fool, in my opinion.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, they're asking where you retired out of, if you want to give that up.
Well, I worked with John for 6 months, and then I got 3/4.
Okay.
And
You worked in. You worked. We're talking about your police time when you were in crime analysis. You were in Brooklyn South.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right now. Yeah.
So,
6'9".
6'9". All right. Well,
Yeah.
that was up to you to give.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
Right.
So listen. The point being, like you said, Rob, there's no reason for this. I don't know. You know, the only reason that the job would push back on this is because they don't want that perception versus reality. They want to give that perception that crime is at an all-time low, violence is at an all-time low, when the reality is that, yeah, maybe people are lucky and they're not getting hit with these bullets that are flying around. But let's look at, and I don't know the number because the empirical data is there, but we don't see it, right? How many bullets are flying? I wonder how many bullets are flying in my community. So I have no problem whatsoever with this bill, and the job shouldn't, and their word salad that it's not as easy as it could be is, if it's not, it's that easy to fix and be able to get this data. Because all you have to do is, like I said, put a little box in there for every complaint report. And if you're taking it as a criminal mischief, but a firearm was involved, because they do ask if a firearm was involved on every 61, right? If that's one of the questions when you're doing a 61 is, what was a firearm involved? Now, was a firearm discharged? Was any ballistics recovered? Yes? No, we didn't get any ballistics recovered, but it was, or ballistics recovered? Yes, it was a reckless endangerment. They were shooting bullets off. So that's going to be an investigate shots fired anyway. But you can get the overall number and then all the subcategories and put that information out. It's not a problem.
And then I know we're talking about shots fired, but it's also the other jobs. People, crime is definitely up. You think about it, grand larcenies should be through the roof. But when you get charges on your account now, you don't need to contact the police. You go straight to the banks automatically refund you.
Yeah.
Grand
Again,
larcenies.
that's a conversation for another day,
Yeah.
Mike. I agree with you 100% that when we talk about crime is down and numbers are down, crime is highly underreported. Underreported for multiple reasons. That's one reason that, people just deal with it on their own. They appeal to the credit card company or to Amazon when their package gets stolen, and whatever the case may be. So they're not reporting it to the police. So the crime statistic isn't there. Also, call it what it is, the incompetency of a lot of the officers that are out there that aren't doing their job for whatever reason, whether it's lack of training, lack of knowledge, or pure incompetency and laziness. They're not taking complaint reports that should be taken. So that's 100%. That's 100% happening out there. But this is absolutely something that is an easy fix. And you know, I'm not a tech guru. I learned things in Cognos by playing around with it. My crime analysis people, I had people that were able to go for special training that they were doing these reports for me. We had the report. I forget, there was one deputy inspector that is the first one. I forget his name. And he was the first one to make these reports, and you used to ask him and he'd put it together for you. He never let his little secrets out on how the report was put together. I forget the name of it. I forget his name. Oh, it's going to bother me now. I'll remember it when we're off the air. But he used to do the report for you if you asked him, and then it would get emailed to you in the morning.
Yeah.
Right? So it's very simple. It's simple. It's a simple fix to correlate this data, and there's absolutely no reason that it should not be presented to the public. Not just the city council, not just have to give it quarterly to city council. There's no reason this information can't be, even if you don't put it on the CompStat sheet, it should be something that the public could easily access on these open-faced data websites that the NYPD has and the city has.
I think also the public and the citizens in New York should be more concerned about why are there shot spotters that are turned off, that are malfunctioning and not working? Why are they not repaired? I mean, these are clear indicators, you know, is it done intentionally because there's a lot of shootings in that specific area and they don't want to have to report anymore? Or is it because, you know, something goes down? If it's such a great tool, and they had mentioned, somebody in the chat mentioned it earlier, that, you know, somebody probably made a lot of money about it, you know, whoever got the contract. But why aren't these things being repaired, or even additional shot spotters put out throughout the city into particular locations? So, I mean, Mike, when in the precinct that you worked on, was there shot spotters? And because I remember there was a shot spotter report, right, that one used to come out, and I don't know if you had any familiarization with that at all.
No, not the shot.
Okay.
Not back in 2014, 15, no.
Right. And listen, and Mike sent me something he found earlier. I didn't have time to break it out for the show, but you know, in 2024, the controller did an audit on the ShotSpotter contract, and because they were saying that only 14% of, if I remember, this is off the top of my head, so don't quote me on the numbers, but approximately, like, I think 12 or 14% of ShotSpotter activations wound up being confirmed people shot. And that's a poor performance indicator for the technology, because that's not what it's made for. It's not to confirm when people are actually shot. No. We know, we don't need ShotSpotter to confirm a person was shot. You have a body, you have a blood trail. It's to tell you when shots are being fired to get a faster response. And it did say in that report that it was almost a 2-minute faster response time when a ShotSpotter activation generated the 911 call.
Yeah. Well, right. Why wouldn't it? Because you're getting immediate information, right? You're not waiting for to go through the whole 911 system. You know, so I mean, I could see where ShotSpotter makes a hell of a lot of the difference. I mean, and I think it was 92 Charlie. Thank you. He brought it up, and he's claiming that Bratton may have made a lot of money with this, but somebody definitely made a lot of money. And but yeah, I agree with you, Ron. You know, here's technology that, you know, it goes faster notification to you than having to go through a 911 system. And we know that the 911 operators do a great job, stressful job, but you know, they got to ask questions, they got to get everything else, and then it goes through you know, then from them to a dispatcher. Dispatcher looks at the queue, right, in the old queue, and then sees who's available and sends it out. So it takes a lot of time. Now I'm understanding it takes a hell of a lot of time, but because of the minimal amount of resources that are out there. But I understand when you have technology like that and you have the capability of an immediate response, hell, you could be saving lives, right? So God forbid there is somebody actually shot there under a shot spotter. You know, the immediate response by the police officers and EMS and the fire department can save a life. So I don't know why.
I think it was a 14%, like you said, for the person shot, and I think it said a 90% accuracy on confirmed shots fired or something like that.
And to me, you know what, 90+% accuracy is pretty damn good, because it geolocates the almost exact location. I remember going to ShotSpotter jobs and having ShotSpotter reports, and as an executive, you know, dealing with the ShotSpotter reports. And it's just amazing where you get a ShotSpotter report for a location and they go there and the cops that actually do a proper investigation find shell casings. It's like, how the frick did it pinpoint it to that? But that's the technology, because it has speakers, you know, listening all over, and it triangulates the location to where it is. So it's good technology. You know, I don't know. I've heard, and I know the other guys have talked about it, where the shot spotters, when they're going out of service and they're breaking down, they're just not being fixed. Now, again, is this a way of avoiding confirming shots fired, and a way of doing it? And listen, I don't think Mamdani's going to have. Mamdani doesn't have a choice. This is coming. It was passed, again, like I said, unanimously, bipartisan. It's coming. But honestly, my opinion, like I said at the beginning of the segment, it's not even specific enough. I think it should be released more often, and more specific data should have been included. There's no reason for it not to be. There's no reason for it not to be.
And
we ask for transparency.
Weren't they saying that though? ShotSpotter is racist or something like that too, and that's probably
I think because of the neighborhoods they put it in. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's going to show.
But that's like
exactly.
Mike, that's like everything else, Mike. Listen, we stop more black people than and people of color than we do white people. But when you look at the percentages of where the crime is occurring to where the stops are done, and again, I'm not justifying every stop, and I'm not saying I've openly said that 250s were weaponized and 250s we were abused for not having 250s overlaying on every single crime on the maps, and it was a definite numbers for numbers thing. But when you look at where deployment of specialty units are, they're where the high crime areas are, where the violence is. And unfortunately, when you look at those statistics, you look at those demographics, they match up. That's so, it bothers me, this whole, everything's racist. If a majority of people that, are involved in it are from a minority group,
It's going to prove the point that it's not, has nothing to do with racism. So yeah. I think that's what they're scared of.
If I'm living in a community, and it doesn't have to be a white, black, or brown community. If I'm in a community where there's a lot of shots being fired, if there was a lot of shots fired being right outside my house or whatever, I would want a shot spotter too. I don't give a shit. Like, who's complaining about this? Is the people that live there complaining? I highly doubt it. It's the same people in the communities that want the police to drive up and down all the time, right? The ones that love the police, but they're the ones that never come outside and tell you, hey, thanks for being there, because they can't show that they're associated with the police. So if it was me, put them on every corner. Then if you think it's racist, put on every freaking corner, and then we'll see. Then all we're doing is judging. We're evaluating the shot spotter by the evidence that it provides us, and it has nothing to do with race then. So I think it's just it's something that they look to do. So,
all right. Oh, Mike, we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Mike.
Two more things. I know someone asked about something with, I think someone asked about, the mental patients being, in a database. Technically, all aideds are in the, as far as I know, they are in a database.
Yep.
Every job you go to, you have to fill out a aided card for those that don't know. So they are tracked. You know exactly if they were an EDP, or, you know, or anything else. And with the job that happened, you know, the shooting in the city, I know people wonder about DV. Usually with jobs like that, it's always the DV unit that gets the hit for that, something like that, which they shouldn't. But
well, to the first point, yeah, are EDPs tracked? They're absolutely tracked, and every time you get a 911 call on the department phone, you could look at the location history, and it'll tell you if an offender lives there, previous 911 calls, EDP histories, things like that. They're all in the database, and when a 911 call goes to an address, it's all right there in the phone. And if a cop is being diligent and being tactically aware, they're going to look at the location before they respond to that location to know what they're walking into. So yeah, they're absolutely being tracked.
But with EDPs, it's keep in mind that it's the location, and it's not the individual is listed, because you have HIPAA laws, right? So you can't really put that, but you can say there had been 3 EDP prior calls at this particular location, and they also give the dispositions too. So you're right. It's conducive to, if you're going on an EDP job, to look that up, because if something ended where and there used to be a code where ESU actually removed, then you know what? That should cue up in your head that this shit may be a little bit more serious than just a regular EDP job.
Yep. All right. All right. All right. I think we hit that one pretty good. So just before you go, Mike, I know we brought up a couple of weeks ago your plight with your mom and the GoFundMe that you started. I put the GoFundMe link in the description for the show. So anybody wants to, I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here that you're on the show, but you know, you want to give us a little update on mom? How's she doing?
yeah, she's doing good. Yeah. But yeah, just, you know, when she came home, I wound up being in the hospital the day before. I wound up in the hospital, but wound up getting out the next, that Monday. My mom came home that Sunday. Everything is good. She's doing better. And then,
so the GoFundMe is still up. You know, we talk about this being, you know, a law enforcement family. Here's Mike. He's a retired law enforcement officer. Mom coming home, doing the therapy, having to go back and forth, doctor's visits and everything else becomes very expensive. It's not all covered under insurance. So if you can help out, if you can go into the show description in YouTube, you can click on the link and you can donate. Any little bit helps. Every little bit helps. If you can't afford to donate, please share the link out on your social media. Let's try and help Mike out and everything else. Mike, again, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you jumping in. We surprised Marlon with that one. He was like, whoa, where'd that come from? Detective Nolan's been trying to call in since Mike Marino called me when we were live, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay with him, and I wound up putting him in the call-in on the show for a little bit. And now that we brought you on, he's going to be looking. So, Detective Nolan, before you ask, when we have Tommy Hot Dogs or whatever his name is that you're always talking about, or Stephen Lee on the show, I'll be sure to bring you on with them. So just to nip that in the bud. But thanks,
hey, Mike. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you, and please, give our best to your mom and the best to you. I hope you, recover and stuff. So, and like Ron said, if anybody, you can support Mike, that would be great, because it's family, and you gotta take care of your family. So, but Mike, thanks again. Appreciate all your insight.
Yeah,
and Marlon also put the link in the chat, so you can find it there too. So we appreciate Marlon for doing that. All right, Mike, be well. We'll talk soon. All right.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, a little surprise visit from one of our listeners, or whatever you want to call them. But yeah, so just before we get to Ask the Executive, I know you got a ping towards the beginning of the show, a little breaking news on the executive perspective. There's a case that's been talked about in the past. Former sergeant. I didn't read the article. Do you have the link to it? I don't have the link. I just have the.
It was the daily. It was a Daily News article. I had it up. Let me see if I can find it.
All right, there's a former sergeant. She was I forget where she was assigned, and initially she wasn't suspended. Then she was suspended. She was involved in a DWI with a fatality up on the Taconic. But it just came down that she pled guilty to that.
Yeah. So the article goes on to read that she on Wednesday, she killed a beloved doorman. They're claiming she's 48, and she pled guilty during a hearing at Westchester County to aggravated vehicular homicide and second-degree manslaughter in connection with the January 22nd crash. And now she had vested out, so she's still going to get her pension, but she faces on sentencing up to 4 to 12 years for that. So again, we've emphasized, if you're going to drink, don't drive. Uber. I think the DEA, right? They were offering a free Uber. I don't know if that's still available, but geez, if you can, here, if you think about it, she has two children, I believe. There's a tragedy on both ends, right? And
Yep.
I mean, seriously, for the doorman, that's the worst tragedy, right? Some poor guy driving down the highway and gets hit head on. That's horrendous. And now there's a family that's been totally disrupted, and this all could have been avoided by not drinking and driving. So if you have the don't do it. If you have an opportunity to get a designated driver, if you don't do that, fuck your car, leave it where it is, and get a ride home. That's the bottom line.
And you're worried about $100, $200, even a $200 Uber. Listen, even if you just get arrested, thank God, by the grace of God, nobody, yourself and nobody else gets hurt, and you get stopped. The lawyer fees are so astronomical. So if you want to look at it as a financial thing, because cops are cheap, right? It's not worth it. Forget about, like you said, it's just the morality of it and getting behind the wheel after drinking. And it's just nothing good can come from it. Only tragedy can come from it. And this was a tragedy where, a man lost his life, a family lost a father, a brother, a son, whatever. I don't know his exact situation. And now she lost her career. She may lose her freedom. Her family is going to lose her for a while. It's just a tragedy all around. So just don't do it. Just don't do it. All right. Anything else?
No, nothing with that.
All right. So let's move on. Let's go to Ask an Executive. It's the portion of the show where you ask Ron and Rob questions, and we answer questions from the chat, either on topic or off topic. And normally you don't have access to a executive or a high-ranking official in the NYPD. Here you have a retired deputy chief, a retired inspector. We're willing to answer questions on or off topic. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I didn't see any questions really during the show. And if you have any future questions that you want to ask while off the air, send any questions to theexecutiveperspective@gmail.com, or you can DM us on X @execperspective. The DMs are open to everybody, so you can send us the stuff. We'll correspond with you. We ensure your anonymity. We know that there are active people on this job that may have questions. They don't want to go into the chat, or they don't want to identify themselves. That's perfectly fine. We will never give up your identity, your location. We'll mask the question if the question in itself gives up a location. So any questions, please pop them up into the chat. I haven't seen. Did you see any during the show?
I didn't see any during the show. No, not at all.
Hold on, I gotta plug in my computer. You know, it wasn't plugged in. I would have done it, John. John's computer went dead one day.
Did it? Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I don't see any questions coming through. If anybody has any questions, you want to throw them in there. But if not, for now, we have in just a couple of weeks, we have the 25th anniversary of 9/11. And 2 weeks ago, when Rob was out with family obligations, I had retired Deputy Inspector Tony Raganella and retired Lieutenant Steve Weiss on the show, and we were talking about the health ramifications from 9/11. And it's funny because at one point I looked at the clock and I said, "Oh, we're not even going to get through 2 hours on the show," when I was looking at what we started to talk about topic wise. And then the conversation just took a left turn and we started talking about our personal accounts from working the rescue and recovery efforts down at Ground Zero. So we're cutting out that portion of the show. We're going to put it out as a special short. Marlon will post it up on YouTube probably the week before 9/11. And it's just going to be this will be the thumbnail: 9/11 Ground Zero, stories from those who lived it. And it's just an account of what we went through. It was funny, but not funny, how when we were talking that, you know, one story led to another, one memory triggered another memory, and you're like, "Oh shit, that's right. Oh shit, that's right." And you just started talking about stuff that you just suppressed. So that'll be coming out. Look for that in the coming weeks. And then next week, we're going to have a special interview. We're going to interview Tom Sullivan. Tom is running for New York State Assembly. That'll be next Wednesday, live at 5:05 Eastern here on YouTube. Tom is a 30-year veteran of the U.S. Army Reserves, retired as a colonel. And he is also a financial manager, works also with his family business, and is running for assembly. And a couple of years ago, he ran, and I'm sure it'll come up in the conversation, against Stacey Pfeiffer Amato. He was ahead. He was winning. She went to court. After a 2-month battle, he wound up losing the election by 15 votes. So I'm sure we'll talk about that when he comes on. So that'll be next week's show. Anything else before we close it out, Rob?
No, that's it. Everybody be safe out there.
Again, we appreciate everybody in the comments. We appreciate the engagement, as always. Always a lively engagement. And we welcome everybody into the chat. A lot of new people in the chat. We appreciate that. About 400 people watching with us live through all the different platforms. Again, we encourage you to go over to the YouTube channel for the algorithm. It helps the algorithm, and you can get involved with the chat. And hey, you never know. We get to know you in the chat, and if you're relevant to a show, maybe like Mike, you wind up coming on as a quick guest for a segment. But we appreciate everybody.
Ron, real quick though, just in the chat, he says, "Sad Veridad." I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. It says, "My son's
Sad
traveling to the
Veridad.
Middle East on the USS George Washington." I heard recently, I think the USS Lincoln's over there, and there was a lot of mental health issues over there. So to his son, thank you, son, for our service, and we support him, and tell him to be safe over there, and Godspeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's they're talking about that, that's been in the news cycle lately. It's some suicides from they're attributing it to possible very long deployments at sea. So people have different opinions about that, but listen, anybody who's serving in the military, We appreciate your service. Anybody who is a veteran that has served in the past, we thank you for your service. It gives us the ability to do what we're doing here and the freedoms to do so. So we really appreciate that. And said Vader, Dad, God bless you, your family, for your sacrifice and for your son's sacrifice. Give him our best wishes to a safe deployment. So without further ado, again, thank you everybody for your interaction and your support. Again, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we have New York's Finest Retired and Unfiltered podcast with John, Eric, and Marlon. You saw John and Marlon in the chat today. Marlon's always in the chat. We appreciate your support, buddy. But they'll be back on Friday morning with another show, and then Monday again, following the news cycle on local politics and police-related issues. And then, like I said, we'll be back next Wednesday at 5:05, and we will have special guest interview of New York State Assembly candidate Tom Sullivan. So until then, everybody, we really appreciate your support, and we'll see you next week.